We have blue button is blinking. Yep, we're live. Yep, we're live. Nope, and they can hear me.
Now make sure that now the microphone's off. Oh, you did it on your phone?
Yep, testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2.
Hi, David.
Hey, Tim, good evening.
Okay, ready.
So you got sweatpants on underneath that tie, John?
Or worse.
Just want to remind everybody, we are live streaming right now.
Hey, Dave,
Yes,
you got me?
who's speaking right now?
Jerry.
Yes, Jerry, yep, I have you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mayor and Council meeting of May 12th, 2020. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing while we have a moment of silence for the now 9,508 New Jersey victims of this pandemic. Thank you.
I wish to announce that the 48-hour notice, as required under the Open Public Meetings Act, was emailed to the Asbury Park Press, the Coast Star, and the Coaster on January the 9th, 2020, placed on the bulletin board in the Borough office, and that a copy has been filed with the Borough Clerk. Mr. Vanel? Councilman Vanel? Absent. Councilman Gubatose?
Here.
Councilman Sexsmith?
Here.
Councilman Weber?
Here.
Mayor Engelstad?
Here, I'd like to ask if our Department of Public Works Supervisor, Biagio Cafone, is on the call.
Yeah, so you have to unmute. There you go.
Yeah, I got it.
You got it?
Yeah,
Sure.
floor is yours.
Okay, G, hello. We've been honoring a number of of people at our meetings, and we'd like to bring this one closer to home and ask you to talk about the work that your team is doing.
Thank you, Mayor. I gotta say that my guys have been absolutely phenomenal throughout this whole time. Starting with my sanitation department that has not taken one day off throughout this whole pandemic, with the leadership of Andy Neves, who is the foreman of the sanitation department. My assistant, Patrick Allen, who basically has not taken a day off either. Sanitation, as far as the garbage, the refuse that we're picking up, it's comparable to summertime because obviously all the people are home. Same with recycling. These guys have been amazing. Can't ask for more. I'm so proud of them. I'm proud of the entire town and the way that we've all come together. I'm so proud to be a part of this department and a part of this town. I can go on and on. I just wanted to have Andy say a few things about his men. I wanted Patrick Allen, who's been my right-hand man from day one. And I couldn't ask for a better assistant and foreman throughout this time and any other time to be with me during this, trying time for the town. So, the mayor knows how uncomfortable I am with this. I'm doing the best I can, and
You're doing great.
thank you. I appreciate everything.
Andrew?
Mayor, everybody hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Yeah, I mean, we've been here since, the whole time, obviously under the guidance of Patrick Allen and Biagio. We couldn't ask for better supervisors. Our department is so good because of them. And also my guys on the sanitation crew, they're great. They're hardworking guys. Anthony Rosa, Josh Straheim, Pete Alvarado, Nick DiPiano. These are all guys that I depend on every day. I make a schedule. I tell them what to do, and they do it without question. They're just a great bunch of hardworking guys, and I'm just happy to be a part of it.
We're very proud to have you as part of the team. G, did you want to hear from Pat as well?
Absolutely.
Pat, are you there? You're going to have to turn your microphone on, Pat. Pat, if you can unmute yourself, please.
Andy's better. No.
Okay, there he is. All right, Pat.
Can you hear
Well, yes, sir.
All right, I got it.
Go ahead.
With both the Biagio and Andrew said, I can't top it. So all I know is that no one's called out of work. The truck leaves the yard 6 a.m. every day, like clockwork. You can set your watch by it. They stay the full day. They go above and beyond. I want to thank Mayor and Council for providing us with the equipment.
Absolutely.
Truck, Kubotas. I want to thank our secretary who puts the schedule together with Andrew. She's a major part of our department. Whatever Biagio needs of her or I need of her, you ask and it's done immediately, if not sooner. That's all I really have to say. They've said it all.
Well, I'd just like to, again, thank you all. There's a number of jobs that cannot be done from home, and yours and police are two of them. So we thank you for what you're doing and what the sacrifices that you've made. And thank you for being safe. Thank you for keeping the town at a very difficult time in a first-class way. And I think I speak for the rest of my elected officials when we say that we're very blessed and lucky to have you. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now is the time for the approval of the minutes of the April 22nd budget workshop meeting. Make a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Bennell? Absent. Mr. Gubatose,
Yes.
Mr. Sexsmith,
Yes.
Mr. Weber,
Yes.
Mayor Engelstad.
Yes, and secondly is the approval of the minutes from the April 28th regular meeting. Make a motion to approve those minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Bunnell, absent. Mr. Gubatose,
Yes.
Mr. Sexsmith,
Yes.
Mr. Weber,
Yes.
Mayor Engelstad.
Yes, now is the time for public comment on agenda items, and I'm going to ask our Borough Administrator, Mr. Brown, to let you be recognized. If you would raise your hand and tell us your name and address and your comment, please. You'll also have the opportunity at the end of the meeting to provide any additional comment you'd like to make. David?
Mayor, we have a lot of people on. I'd ask if you could use the electronic hand raise because I can't see everybody in one screen. So if you use electronic hand raise, I'll be able to pick you up quicker.
And just so people know how that goes, if you have to click on if you're on the computer, there's a button at the bottom that says participants, and then you get a screen where you can raise your hand electronically.
Thank you, Council President. I don't see any hand raised. at
Well, I
this
do. I
time.
see Julia Rands is raising her hand. If you see her on your screen, David, could you unmute her, please?
And Ms. Rand may have to unmute herself.
Julia, if you could, you can
Yeah,
hear me,
there's-
Julia?
There's over 60 people on here and I can't
Okay.
seem to find her right now.
Hi, Julia. If you could push the mute button on your screen, then that'll enable you to talk.
There you go. I'm on the iPad Pro. Am I?
Yeah, we can hear you, Julia. Go ahead. What is your comment, please?
Well, it's actually a question. During the discussion of the beach or the 3 workshops on the agenda, will we be able to participate?
Yes, you will.
Okay,
What I would ask is that you let us conduct our conversations and then we will open it up to the floor.
okay. My other question was about the sanitation, everyone, the public works workers, all doing a fabulous job. But I noticed none of them have masks on and I wonder if they're being protected.
I'm sure they're taking all the necessary precautions that are necessary in an outdoor environment. I can tell you that it can be difficult to breathe if you're wearing a mask outside and engaged in
No,
physical
I
activity.
guess I meant gloves as well, so that, because they have to handle a lot of stuff, you know.
I can assure you that they're taking every precaution necessary.
Okay, just worried about them. They do a fabulous job.
You and me both.
That's my only comment.
Okay. David, anyone else?
The public works guy is wearing masks.
I don't see any hands raised, Mayor.
In general, public.
Oh, wait. John Boyle's raising his hand. Go ahead, John.
I was actually not raising my hand. I was just pointing out the fact that I see 3 raised hands in the participant screen.
Okay, I can't see everybody tonight, so they gotta use the electronic.
Yeah,
hands.
so you have Thomas Cohn, Marion Spillman, and Shada Greenblatt all have their hands raised electronically.
Oh, I see them now. Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
was on the wrong screen.
And hey, David, before we jump into that, can I just the record reflect that Councilman Bunnell has joined the meeting? Just want the record to reflect that.
Thank you.
Gotcha. John, thank you very much. Both Johns. And TJ Cohen has his hand raised. He's up next.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mayor, I was just wondering, on the bills list, there's a payment for a painting company to paint the Second Avenue concession. I was wondering why that wasn't done by Public Works. I mean, that should be in their wheelhouse. Should it not?
Okay, that's
2114. I was wondering, are we doing that the right way this time?
Mr. Mr. Brown, would you like to address Mr. Cohen's question?
Yes, in regards to that, that's a temporary position. So the temporary position comes through the department head, which is myself, and then it's recommended to the governing body for approval.
Great.
And
It's a
it's-
part-time position and it's been done by the book this time.
Yes, because it's a
Great.
temporary position and it's additional responsibilities on a certain personnel.
Perfect. And then thank you, Mr. Brown. And then in terms of 2020-118, the resolution for Erica Costas to be the clerk, I just wanted to clarify, so basically we're paying the previous clerk on terminal leave. Now we're paying Ms. Costas to be the clerk, and then we also are paying a deputy clerk. Is that correct, Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great. I just wanted to clarify that. Thanks very much, Mayor.
David, I don't recall the names that Mr. Boyle gave us. Who else? was
Yeah,
looking
there's
to-
Marianne Spillman. You can unmute yourself.
Yes, I had a question about the minutes. Where do we see the minutes before they've been approved?
They are included in the package that's posted on the website.
I didn't see minutes. I saw the agenda and I saw documents that contained the zoning resolution, but no minutes were there.
Okay.
I'm
Let me-
sorry,
well,
Mayor.
Actually, Mayor, if I may, and Greg and Erica can jump in, but by law, the minutes are not public documents until they're approved by the governing body.
That's correct.
Oh, I see. So they'll be posted for the next meeting.
We don't post them until after the vote.
Oh, so when will we see them?
You'll see them this evening.
Go ahead, Erica.
Beg your pardon?
This evening, after the meeting and after approval, I usually post them to the website.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're
And then
welcome.
I had a question on, can I ask another question? On an
If it's
agenda
for-
item?
Yes, please.
On an agenda item. Will I looked at the zoning changes that are being proposed. Will it any way affect the current zones or permitted uses or anything about the zones themselves?
It's more about cleaning up the existing ordinances.
So
I'll
it
let-
will not affect zones or permitted uses or anything like that?
Greg, do you want to touch base on that?
No, it will not affect district regulations or the boundaries of any zones or any of the uses.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We now have Shayna Greenblatt Janoff. You may unmute yourself.
Hi, Shauna Greenblatt, Janoff, 414 Monmouth Avenue. I have two areas that I want to ask questions or comment on. One is with regard to the shade tree ordinance. And I suppose that I should wait to hear the discussion about it before I comment. I guess I'm asking that question.
Either way, you're welcome to comment now, but it would probably be more helpful if you waited till we had a discussion.
Okay, I'm happy to do so. And then I also have a bunch of questions and concerns about beach. And
Yeah, and with all three of those workshop items, we will allow for public comment after we have our conversation. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh boy, it's getting heated.
Mayor, that concludes all the electronic hands that are raised.
All right. We have three workshop discussion items. The first is the proposed shade tree ordinance. Ask Mr. Cannon to walk us through what has been done so far and where this stands, please.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. So as the governing body is aware, we have, the governing body has been working on a shade tree committee ordinance since before I've been the borough attorney. And there was a draft that was worked on by the prior council last year that I made some revisions to and came on for introduction here before this governing body, and the governing body having more time to consider, and there being new members of the governing body as well. Additional I wouldn't say a different ordinance or in a different vein of regulation to put it under really The principal change here is the last ordinance was under the zoning officer. It doesn't have a particular expertise in
Get
trees.
to the point.
And so the principal
I hope
change,
I'm
this would put the purview of shade trees within the borough under the purview of a certified arborist, someone certified in that regard, and within a statutorily based and authorized shade tree commission, which we could then oversee that process of the regulation of shade tree.
No, just the board. I'm muted.
Sure. And I would say overall, in terms of the overarching regulations that are contained in this ordinance, before you get to the Shade Tree Commission and the certified arborist principally in the initial instance would be forgive me, I lost my train of thought there. I thought I was muted and saw my screen. No. So the areas of regulation in general, overarching structure, is that shade trees that are on public property, meaning the rights of way, parks, municipal facilities, municipal lands, would require a shade tree or arborist approval to touch any of the trees, trim borough controlled areas. In terms of private properties, the regulation extends only to the removal of trees and obtaining the certified arborist's opinion in some cases, depending upon whether it's diseased or falls down or whether it's being removed for convenience. Also requires all applicants before the land use boards, but they already had this requirement under removal of trees in the zoning ordinance, as you can see from the edited Shade Tree Commission that I put together, that the planning board for removals of 3 or more in certain instances had authority. That jurisdiction has essentially been expanded and then transferred to the Shade Tree Commission. So if you come in with a application for let's say a deck and it doesn't require any of the removal of trees, then you just go through the ordinary zoning permit process. If you're going to put a deck where there's 2 trees and those trees have to be removed, then the zoning officer refers you to the shade tree to comply with the permit requirements. Which is essentially that not that you're prohibited perhaps from taking them down if they find it necessary for your improvement or what have you, and standards that'll be really developed by the arborist and the Shade Tree Commission, but guided by the ordinance that was drafted for presentation tonight. But they would be guided by those guidelines, and you might have to replace trees or pay a fee where the borough would then replant trees on the public grounds in rights of way, or they could require the homeowner to replant a replacement tree in their yard in lieu of that. And it kind of leaves the options of the homeowner, doesn't leave them stuck with, I just can't remove this tree and I want to do something to my yard. The ordinance that was written, I want to point out for the governing body, I already knows this because it was in my introductory email, but the public perhaps doesn't. It's far easier for me to take things out of an ordinance I write than it is for me to craft stuff that you want to put in. So I'll give you an example. There's one regulation in there, you're not allowed to attach a chain or lights or anything to it. Well, I mean, that wouldn't work, for example, in Red Bank, where they decorate the trees with lights every Christmas for the River Center celebration. And it may not work in Bradley Beach, where people chain their trees to bikes on Main Street to go to the stores or the ice cream shop or something like that. Ordinance regulations that are contained in this ordinance, I largely grafted from Princeton, which is a very stringent ordinance. And so there may be things in here that you might think, oh, that doesn't work in Bradley Beach. And that's why I bring it to you for workshop before we're voting on it, is because you live in Bradley Beach and I don't. And I need you to enforce and think that there's parts of it that are highly objectionable or would never work in Bradley Beach. There likely are, because I presented everything to the governing body that they might consider. And I've already received some feedback that things in that regard might not work in town. So I don't want the public's benefit. I want you to understand that this is a draft ordinance of a menu of things that the governing body could potentially do within this regulatory framework that was set up with a certified arborist and a reconstituted shade tree commission with some expanded duties and a dedicated reserve for these fees that I was just talking about, where they could go spread and promote the planting of trees in addition to regulating their removal. That's the overarching substance of it. But I don't want the public to be fixated on any particular detail or any particular number or anything in there, because those are things that I made specifically stringent and included in there, because it's far easier for me to do that and take them out when the governing body says no, 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 than for me to craft them in, or some might not even thought about it if I hadn't put it in there. So that's the process for the publics to understand how I go about doing this. It's presenting everything the governing body might do, even if it might not fit Bradley Beach, which is very possible, particularly in these kind of scenarios.
I know this has been a subject close to the council president's heart, so I'm going to ask Mr. Weber to take the floor. Any questions you have for the borough attorney?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate the effort that Borough Attorney and Al Gubitosi put into this. It is a much different ordinance than we were looking at before. I think it's much improved. It's, as far as I can see, haven't heard from the public yet, but as far as I can see, it's 95% all good. So I have one comment. It's come up in every different version of the shade tree ordinance in the last few months. But with respect to the planting strip, we're allowing a 3-foot little walkway across the planting strip to the street. And on a couple of occasions I've mentioned, I think that's fine if for a property without a driveway, where, if somebody's got a curb cut for a driveway just a few feet away, I'm not sure that they need another concrete, across the planting strip. The idea is we're trying to get as much, green space, lawn space, permeable place for water and tree roots and whatever. So if we put a tree there, it does better. That's my only change. I want to hear what the public has to say, but thanks, Greg, and thanks, Councilman Gubitosi.
Other members of council that would like to say a few words or question the borough attorney on this topic before we go to the public?
There's a couple of things I wanted to say. I guess the first is something that I really like about this draft ordinance is that it prioritizes preservation of our really tall old canopy trees through the replacement schedule and the fee schedule for removing these big old trees. I think my one concern that I have is based on this added authority for the Shade Tree Commission, is I'm thinking we're going to probably need to hire some manner of professionals to support it, whether it's an attorney or a planner or, certainly the arborist, but that's just something I think we need to pay attention to, especially since we're going to be having some interesting financial times here for the next year or so, at least. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Alan, you're going to have to unmute yourself.
Forgot that I muted, sorry. I also like the direction of the ordinance relative to the earlier version that we were considering. I applaud a lot of the efforts here to create greater protections. There are, number one, I have 1,000 relatively minor suggestions. I'm not going to take us all through that now, but perhaps I'd like to hear from our public, but I'd also like the public to have a sense for some of my smaller suggested edits. On a larger scale, couple of things. One, I do think we need an expert, and in fact, specifically, this ordinance references an arborist. I think we should at least allow the discretion to use a tree expert, which my understanding is higher ranking than an arborist in terms of tree knowledge and education. So some of my recommendations would be to say tree expert or arborist. The other thing, there's a provision here to hire that individual full-time. I don't think that's necessary, so I'd like to revisit the wording there to suggest that this would be more on a consulting basis, perhaps once a week, once every other week, one day a week or every other week, and better manage that expense. The one part of the section that I actually applauded and I applaud is tree replacement, the tree replacement plan. However, I was struck by the size of the fees, and I'd like to revisit that a little bit. There's another section that references that there would be reimbursement for hourly rates of our DPW and/or the arborist. I think that section could use more significant reworking. For example, it has specific dollar amounts that I think, probably should be addressed differently. And then finally, my last overriding comment is a number of the definitions that previously existed were eliminated that I think are still relevant. And so I would suggest that we expand the new list of definitions to include about 4 or 5 prior words that were included as our definitions in the previous ordinance.
Councilmember Bonnell, did you have any comments?
The only comment I have is I think that at least a portion of any arborists or tree expert fees that we incur when somebody applies to cut down a mature growth tree should go to them.
And I'll just weigh in. The one aspect of this that I appreciate the most is the established finite period of time that the Shade Tree Commission would have to get back with a decision. That was the primary issue I had with the previous Shade Tree Commission, was the inordinate amount of time that was taking to come to any decision with regards to any tree action in town. So that language I like a lot. And Mr. Cannon, thank you very much for your hard work on this. If there's a better example than Princeton in terms of a beautiful town with trees, it's hard to match. So that's a great example to start with. And at this time, Mr. Brown.
Councilman Gubitosi for that. I say he found that one.
All right, Alan, great job. If any of members of the public would like to provide their 2 cents on this particular proposed ordinance, now is the time.
Mr. Mayor, it's Gubitosi. I just want to follow up with that praise to suggest that actually I got the idea from Ms. Egbert, who hopefully will be commenting as well, but she directed me to Princeton.
Team effort.
Rich Despins here. I'd like to comment.
Okay, Rich.
Hi. Any place that you could find in that ordinance that makes people plant trees or somebody get trees on blocks would be a big plus for the town. Anytime I walk down up or down streets, always those streets that have trees are much more appealing. I mean, a great deal so. Secondly, I didn't see in the ordinance, and maybe there, and I missed it. There are some trees in the town that have this heavy growth of vines. I think there should be something in there that they at least are removed by the owners. The end result is the tree will die. The end result will be most likely the tree falling and doing harm to buildings or people. That's all I had.
Thank you, Rich.
Hey, can I ask a follow-up? Mr. Despins, do you mean vines on trees on public property, or are you referring to trees private?
Well, I think on all properties, you could have a public property or a commercial property that has a tree that the tree is going to be lost eventually. In worst case scenario, it's going to kill the tree and then do harm to people. But that would include also those in front of people's houses on the grass strip.
Thank you. I know that some other folks had some comments they wanted to make.
Yes, Mayor, you have Shanna again.
Hi, Shauna Greenblatt, 414 Monmouth Avenue. I had sent a number of questions and comments to Borough and Council earlier today, and I'll just reiterate a couple of them here. So first of all, I'm very appreciative of this version of the Shade Tree Ordinance. And I know that a lot of work has gone into taking it to this point. So I find it very exciting. I have a couple of questions. With regard to the tree expert or the certified arborist, this individual would also play a role of enforcement. And enforcement is a bit of an administrative role. So while there's, it's kind of a dual role, and it actually could ultimately be more time consuming than we might think. So, during the course of, the season when people might be cutting trees down, this is something that I think we have to sort of keep in mind if that tree expert is also going to be playing a bureaucratic role as well. Another point I wanted to clarify, when a property goes for construction and there's a demolition, does the demolition permit include the survey and what's existing on the property with regard to foliage? Because I want to make sure that we don't miss that. Sometimes an entire property is cleared before there's even a construction plan that's put in place.
It's supposed to, Shauna.
It's supposed to? Is it articulated in this ordinance?
Ms. Cannon?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that real quick?
With regard to a demolition permit, does a demolition?
Oh, yes,
permit-
I'm sorry, forgive me, thank you. So any land use application that goes to the zoning officer that involves the removal of trees would require compliance with the new section 425 chapter. So whatever that entails, it would basically it would treat all the trees the same whenever it touched upon the borough's jurisdiction. So if it's
For a
DPW,
demo permit is
if it's land use application, if it's in order to take it down because it's a hazardous condition over the public right of way. Your initial point was well taken that the arborist position involves enforcement as well. It basically, any tree issues in the town are being funneled to the arborist, wherever received.
Greg, just to add to that, under section 2432 in the draft that you've presented to us, I don't know, about 2 pages in, there's a list of Shade Tree Commission shall have the following general powers and duties. And your item number 4 says authority to review tree surveys, removal plans, and planting plans submitted with land development applications referred to the commission by the planning board or zoning board pursuant to blah, blah, blah. So I think, Shauna, that is addressing your question.
about demolition, you mean?
Shauna, the
Yes.
short answer is that a demolition plan is supposed to show any kind of changes to the landscape also. Doesn't have to be, but it has to have notes because it also affects the sheet flow of water. So a proper demolition plan would have notes detailing even shrubs that are going to be removed.
Okay, because we see lots that are completely leveled with not nary a tree remaining. So that's something that definitely needs to be addressed in this ordinance. So I appreciate that. So the only other comment that I have is the very importance of communication, oversight, and accountability. And that's really critical to put this ordinance in place. Whether it's for the public utility, whether it's to all residents and homeowners, property owners in Bradley Beach. I think this is really critical because these are very big changes to our current policy. So I think they have to be communicated really effectively. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment with regards to this proposed?
Yes, we have Julie with her hand raised.
Julie?
605 Park Avenue. I just wanted to also make some statements in agreement with Mr. Gubitosi in regards to the fact that we should do this as a consultant type of role, because it will probably be, activities there are going on with demolition. And again, we're a very small town and we have to be very, very careful of just constantly just creating conditions because we have projects going on. So I definitely agree with that. Now, that's been brought up about the maintenance of trees. And I know when I skimmed through the ordinance, I didn't see anything about, to a point about the ivy that's all around some trees. And a prime example would be at the rec center. I know when we did the cleanup last spring there for the grammar school, that along that entire on Main Street and along the side, that some of those trees are just being choked by ivy. So, you know, who is responsible for cleaning those up? And I think that's something, because it's a very old tree, would be something that we would want to definitely look at immediately. So I was just curious about that. And also, when I was reading the ordinance, it says not only trees, but shrubs. Is shrubs also part of a shade tree commission? And is that enforcement of height and everything else that goes along with that? Because shrub maintenance is a major issue in town overall, and lack of enforcement and maintenance.
Greg, would you like to address that?
I'm sorry, Mayor, you called on me? Forgive me.
Yes, I did.
Thank you.
The question
So
pertains to
the
shrub.
first instance with the rec center tree with the ivy, this ordinance contemplates that the Shade Tree Commission, if reconstituted, would be responsible for the grounds also surrounding, and that's what the statute requires, the grounds and areas surrounding all of the borough shade trees. So they, the Shade Tree Commission would essentially be in charge of that administratively and logistically speaking. That might, and largely, you know, this will go forward as the administrative framework is built around this ordinance. Whether they call Public Works to take down the ivy or whether they effort to do it themselves is ultimately really going to be governed by the shade tree, but they will have the authority to go and address situations like that. They have it under the statute, and this, the powers in this ordinance mirror those statutory provisions. And you had a second question as well. Forgive me.
With regards to shrubs.
Oh, with the shrubs. So that is also going to, so number one, with the general maintenance and upkeep of shrubs on private property or the intersections or within site triangles or within rights of way is governed by the police regulations and clearances and heights. And that's already spelled out and enforced by the code enforcer. I don't anticipate that those enforcement activities would be transferred to the certified arborist. Those would remain in code enforcement. And in some cases, the police, if there was an accident, reported to code enforcement and vice versa. Those would stay in place. But however, the mentioning of shrubs is like, for example, you know, you could have a very heated argument, as I understand it, with tree experts as to what constitutes a shrub and what constitutes a tree in certain instances. And the inclusion of shrubs is largely geared towards not escaping regulation because someone's calling something a shrub instead of a tree, and there's 6 different reference points that call it 3 things one and 3 things another. But this is generally, shrubs is not meant under this ordinance, is not defined to include any non-woody plant. And only the vegetation must be woody in order to qualify under this ordinance. Whether it's a crepe myrtle and it's got 15 stems, or whether it's a 50-year-old oak tree and it has 1 big trunk or 2 big trunks. This is intended to encompass both of those, but not your standard overgrown hedge that's sitting in front of someone's fence. It wouldn't really, at least in my view, isn't intended to apply that way. And I don't think ultimately I can't speak for a shade tree commission as they're constituted. But
Any other comments with regards to, sorry, go ahead, please.
There you have Kathleen Martin has her hand raised.
Okay,
Go ahead,
I think I answered my question, but I had a question about private property. There's a tree at 410 Bradley Boulevard, and the tree next door is over really, and it's eating. Roots are going under my driveway, lifting my pavers, have penetrated my sprinkler system, have knocked my steps up, which I've had to replace, and there's no intention to take it down. This is something. Where do I?
Everybody, please mute your phones, please. Kathy Martin is the only person that should be speaking right now.
Oh, did you hear me?
You were breaking up, so give it to us
I
again.
certainly understood the question to be about private property. There's another tree on another private property that's growing into your yard, either true roots or branches. Is that correct, Ms.? Martin?
Yeah, it's the roots, basically.
So this ordinance is not intended to address those neighbor to neighbor, private property tree to private property tree situations. That is a private right of action between the neighbors. It's governed by the common law. The tree is owned by the person where the trunk hits the ground, and the roots and the branches that cross over property lines can be dealt with in various ways, depending upon what they're doing under the common law and proper New Jersey property law. The only time that the borough is involved with trees on private property that's not in the right of way, parks, public properties under this ordinance is if you're removing it. If the tree is not being removed, then all the regular common law elements apply, and you and your neighbor can, if you can go to court essentially to resolve that ultimately in that private property context. But if you or your neighbor decide to remove a tree, whatever it's doing, then that's when the borough would get involved as to whether it can be removed or not. And its impingement upon your house's foundation and other private properties and things like that would be taken into account under the ordinance to either issue or deny the permit or require replacement or otherwise. But in terms of the actual nuisance, like tree nuisances from private property, this is not intended to and will not address the situation that you described.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mayor, we now have Mr. TJ Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mayor, thank you for having this workshop. This is great for the public to interact, and this is a really good template to start with. Kudos to Mr. Cannon and Mr. Gubitosi for putting it together. I also want to thank Mr. Gubitosi for acknowledging right out front that the cost in Schedule 8 tree replacement are onerous. So I would appreciate that being reviewed because the person also has to remove the tree and then pay this tree replacement fee, which I believe is too high. Mr. Cannon, I just had that this was written for Princeton and a couple minor things on section 270-25, item B. It references major residential subdivisions, which are probably very common in Princeton, but not so common in Bradley Beach. So if we could just strike the word major from that and have it be
what
also
section, Mr. Cohen? Forgive me.
270-25, item B.
I don't think anything's changing there.
Well, I'm asking you to strike major residential subdivisions because
Oh,
we're
you're
not
asking
going to have.
I follow you. Okay, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
we're not going to have 4-lot subdivisions here, really. So, but it should affect minor subdivisions to get the benefit of the trees.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Okay.
And then I don't know if we can incorporate all commercial projects into that also, into that segment.
Okay, David?
And then on 270-25A, it's about the natural grass and the planting strips. It's triggered by a review of the zoning officer, but could we also add certificate of occupancy, or whether it be a transfer or a rental, that would then go away as part of that inspection?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, we could certainly look into that. Let me see. In terms of this
Yes.
is artificial of CO or transfer of ownership.
Yes, whether it's
CO or transfer of ownership. You're saying. Sorry, I'm typing while you're
Sorry.
saying this.
I appreciate the interaction.
CO or transfer for ownership being the trigger. That's what you're suggesting, correct?
Yes, along with the zoning officer that you've already built in here.
Instead of zoning permit. I follow you. Okay.
In addition to, and then in item 425-8, item A, about the size of the tree, the DBH of the tree as it's referred to. I thought 3 inches was very, very stringent. It's like 6 or 8 inches. So
It's 8 in Princeton. I should be clear, I only took a lot of the regulatory framework, but your zoning ordinance here in town already had 3 inches. So that's why I
did.
put it in there. But it was a far less in scope. You did 3 inches only if you weren't a homeowner, if it wasn't on your property, there were exceptions. So I kept the inches the same, but I did point to the governing body that is the largest determinative factor in scope of this ordinance. And perhaps 3
Okay.
inches was too small because the last one didn't regulate all that much, to be honest.
Mhm.
If you're going to regulate a lot more, maybe the tree needs to be bigger. So I think your point is well taken.
if the council would just review it, I just felt that it was a little prohibitive, for a regular homeowner. But thank you very much, Mr. Cannon.
You're very welcome.
Okay.
David?
Next, we have an Eileen with her hand up.
Eileen?
Got to unmute Eileen.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Is this the appropriate time to ban bamboo planting in town? If anybody has paid attention to how invasive it is deadly, and it really should be banned in town. I know other municipalities have done that.
Mr. Mayor, if I can jump in here, great point, Eileen. We have a plan for another ordinance to deal with invasive species, bamboo, the dreaded English ivy that's already been mentioned, and there are a few others like Japanese knotweed and others. Some towns have ordinances regarding these invasive species, and it's my hope that we can craft an ordinance to deal just with them. So the answer to your question is not in this ordinance, but it's coming.
Okay. And I'm assuming artificial turf is not involved. It's not appropriate in this ordinance.
Mr. Cannon, I can't remember if we're.
No, the artificial turf is actually, so it was grandfathered in. This ordinance changes it to, Mr. Cohen touched on this earlier. He had suggested a transfer of CO or a transfer of the property. In the ordinance, it essentially is a large zoning application or a land use submission of $7,500 or more. And I can give you the logic behind that. I mean, I made up the number. That's not any standard that's contained anywhere. The thought was it's probably about $1,000 or $750, $1,000, $1,500 to change that area in front of your house. And if you're doing 7,500 or more in improvements to your house, then that would be a 20% or less of the cost. So it was kind of a midway point between forever and as Mr. Cohen suggested, which is if the governing body wishes to go in this direction, certainly acceptable, well, upon the issuance of a CO or transfer or something like that. Because you have people going out and people coming in one way or another in those instances. But I don't, I put it as a monetary value, so it wouldn't be triggered until someone did some kind of substantial improvement. So you didn't whack the new homeowner in town with a $1,500 bill or the guy leaving or gal leaving. So that was a compromise that I wrote into there. But it is eliminating the grandfather. So, I mean, theoretically, if these properties continue to be improved, there will eventually be no artificial grass in town.
Could you please repeat that about no artificial grass in town?
So, yeah, assuming that whatever trigger the governing body decides on, whether it's on one end of the spectrum, like Mr. Cohen suggested, or large improvement or addition or whatever we decide on, there's many different things you can put a zoning permit in for. There's a whole list of them, in fact, on your the borough's website. And if we pick those as the triggers, whenever those things happen on the property, eventually there would be no artificial grass in town as those properties triggered what was in the trigger in the ordinance.
Okay.
At this point in time, it's doing a $7,500 improvement that requires a zoning permit submission.
I would greatly appreciate if we do not have artificial turf throughout town. And I appreciate your efforts on that. Thank you.
David?
Mayor, I believe that concludes all the electronic hand raise.
I got Julia Rand is raising her hand. Julia, if you'll unmute your microphone, please. Go ahead, Julia. You're muted. Try again, Julia.
Artificial turf. And what am I to understand that what has already been done, like on certain residences already, that they can still continue that, or can that be removed?
I was just saying, if I can summarize, if it exists and you're not doing anything to your property, it's going to stay for the time being. But as Mr. Cannon said, if you're coming in for site improvements, if you're coming in for major improvements, COs, we can decide what that trigger is. But so over time, it would be eliminated as people improve their
Right.
properties.
But at the moment, they're allowed to keep it, is what you're saying.
The
So
grandfather.
we can't do anything about it. Okay, thank you. That's all.
Anyone else, Dave?
Yes,
Perhaps maybe Lauren.
yes. Lauren
Go
Egbert.
ahead.
Go ahead, please.
Well, first, I would like to thank everyone for their efforts on this. It's a wonderful piece of work, and I am absolutely delighted. On the subject of the size of the trees that we're talking about as pertains to private property, if you do refer back to the Princeton model, they reference diameter. They also reference height on evergreens and ornamental trees. And I think that we might be somewhere, larger than the 3 inches, but smaller than Princeton, given the forestry and the amount of tree type resources they have, and the issues that we have connected to trees like rainwater runoff, the significant cooling effect on our streets and on properties, the reduction in heating and cooling costs, depending upon evergreen or deciduous trees and where they're placed. So I do agree that there's some work to be done there, and that we might include species, type of tree and height as well as diameter. With regard to replacement costs, and I don't disagree that deserves to be closely examined also. The fees that jump out, replacement fees that jump out as particularly large, are really on very, very big trees, the couple of feet or in that area of diameter. So I'm hoping that we still wind up with something that is a significant disincentive for removing those trees. And if you look at the oaks that we have around town that enhance everybody's living and our ecology, I think we really do want to make a statement that if at all possible, they need to remain. And there's such a greater benefit ecologically to an old growth tree than anything new you can plant. I don't know if there might be some other escape hatch that could happen in the case of a hardship that could be included in the ordinance to provide some relief there. And I also just wanted to mention that the models that I'm familiar with have generally included an arborist once a week. I don't know whether we would need that all year round, or maybe there might be opportunity to explore shared services here. And again, I say arborist, tree expert really is the certification in New Jersey that would be the most desirable. And again, thank you. Thank you for hearing me. Thank you for all your fantastic work. And I've been delighted to see everybody's support on this issue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
David?
Yeah, I don't see any other hands.
Okay. The next workshop discussion item, so let me just close that up. Greg, sorry, go ahead. Who is speaking?
You're muted, Lauren.
Lauren, if you're muted right now.
Please forgive me for the interruption. There was one thing that I intended to mention and forgot. We did have ordinances before the Shade Tree Commission that did, in my memory, and they did address trees on private property. And I believe at that time we had a 4-inch
standard there of diameter. I could be mistaken on that, and I don't know if it might be worth some research, but this, we do have some history of that. Thank you.
Okay. So, Greg, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but I'm guessing you're going to take these comments and in the redraft, provide the alternatives that are being discussed and pass that around prior to the next meeting?
So as you, I got some feedback from governing body members already via email. Obviously not replying to everybody, so I've incorporated some of that. Councilman Sexsmith came up with a particularized point that I missed as the casualty on the private properties. And Councilman Gubitosi, I know had, he gave kind of a summary at this moment, but he did, I believe he has more specific and detailed edits. And if it was okay with the governing body, if Al and I could work together to get this into a final form for introduction, we could go ahead and do that based on the comments that I received, and then I know what Al has that he had mentioned in his presentation.
I was going to ask the same thing, Greg. Thank you for bringing this up, only because I have what I think for the most part are relatively minor edits, nothing that would change substantively what we've discussed, perhaps with the exception of part-time arborist / tree expert. And as I mentioned, the tree replacements section, I think needs more significant redrafting. But with those two exceptions, I have a lot of other edits, but they're relatively minor.
Okay.
And so for the public's benefit going forward, Councilman Gubitosi and I work together. We'll put something together for introduction so the public will see it once then. It will then be adopted as you see the zoning ordinance is affected. So it will go to the planning board for review. There'll be a hearing there. Then it'll come back to us for public hearing. So notwithstanding what seems like a very comprehensive discussion right now, there will be at least 2 more public hearings on this ordinance for further discussion, as well as another vote at a council meeting for introduction. So there'll be plenty more times to comment on the finished product as well. And of course, as always, everything can be changed until we stamp adopted on it.
Okay, thank you. And Greg, if you could keep going and give us the background on proposed zoning ordinance, the second workshop discussion item.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is far easier than the prior one, if just by size. And so the zoning permit application process, which is the permit you submit for a fence, porch, addition, any sort of thing that doing a substantial improvements to the house, you submit to the zoning officer. It was included in Chapter 5 in your code under the zoning officer and his establishment of his office. Wasn't terribly detailed. It was 6 paragraphs long. In the zoning officer's opinion, was subject to too much interpretation, particularly with today's very particularized codes, as well as very difficult to find. He was receiving a lot of calls asking him where the zoning permit application process is in our code, because it's not in the zoning ordinance under 450. It was buried under the commissions and committees and offices and departments of the borough in Chapter 5. In fact, I had a little bit of a hard time finding it when George Waterman, your zoning officer, brought this up to me. So the point was well taken. And so he put together the model zoning permit ordinance and crafted to what he does actually here physically in Bradley Beach, and put it into writing, and has asked that it be moved from 450 to from Chapter 5 to 450. So when people are looking at what they can do in their zone, they ultimately land at the bottom on the zoning permit process, and it's more intuitive location, and will cut down on the calls to his office. It's not changing any of the fees, costs, or anything that he's currently been doing or requiring of the applicants. It simply just puts it in writing so that people know what they need to do before they show up. And other than that, it's pretty much self-explanatory in the text of the ordinance, how you apply, what you can do, and how he's going to review it, and the materials you need to submit. And again, the fees were $45 and $100. And that was that remains the same in this ordinance, notwithstanding its moving location in the borough code.
Thank you. Questions or comments from council?
I think if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Cannon, this also addresses fines and penalties, which Mr. Waterman shared with me had not been under his jurisdiction for some period of time, that they've been folded in under bill, break them out. to have that power in zoning as well. Is that correct? Or do you know?
Yes, correct. I mean, if you go, yes, it was not specifically spelled out, which points out some of the flaws of the original Chapter 5 ordinance. It just wasn't specific, it had general penalty in there, so it effectively ends up being the same thing, because I think he only put up to $2,000, which is the general penalty anyway. So it's not a monetary difference, but in terms of his authority, where it is, and being clear about what his responsibilities and duties are, this is far better than the original 6-paragraph ordinance.
Thank you.
I just like to say, as somebody that's gone through the zoning permit application process, anything that makes it easier on the applicant and on the enforcement end of things is much appreciated. So thank you.
Council members Weber or Brunel? Okay. Any public comment with regards to this proposed ordinance?
Yes, Mayor, we have Mr. TJ Cohen.
Sure, Mayor. I appreciate Mr. Waterman's work on this, and it really assists the public and the professionals with understanding our ordinances better. Chapter 450 have a real unorganized nature to them, and this will really assist the residents, like I said, the applicants and the professionals. So I appreciate the work done on this. Will this move to the planning board next, Mr. Cannon, for review? Or will it have to be voted on?
Because it's I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's all right.
Yes, because it amends land development regulation or a zoning ordinance, it must be reviewed by the planning board under the municipal land use law. So it will have the same process I just described for Shade Tree Commission.
So after the first reading, it'll go to them for review.
Yes, sir.
Great. Thanks very much, Mr. Cannon.
Okay, we have
Any other
yes, Mary Ann Spillman.
Yes, Mary Ann Spillman, 902 Ocean Avenue. I just had I think it's great to simplify, as everybody has said, to move areas where people are expecting to find them. But I had a question specifically under 450-79A under administration. I think these are new words that were added. And it says, any action taken by the borough, blah, 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 shall give primary consideration to the quote above mentioned matters and to the welfare of the entire community of Bradley Beach. What are those above mentioned matters? Because they're not in this particular draft. This is the context.
Mr. Cannon, did you pick up her question?
Yes, on the administration and purpose.
Could you give us the section that you had the question about?
It's 450.
I'm sorry, I understand what you're saying. It's in A. It essentially it refers up to the other zoning district regulations, meaning that when the zoning officer goes to look at a zoning permit, he must take into account all of the other things that were expressed before that. I mean, you can see it's 450-79. There's 78 sections before that talk about all kinds of standards for neighborhoods, districts. And so the zoning officer's review of these zoning permits is informed by the intention of the rest of the zoning ordinance. So it's expressing that he should be determining these zoning permits in connection with everything that's been expressed above this in the zoning ordinance as to how the governing body has expressed Bradley Beach should be run for zoning reasons.
Okay, so there are no changes in those prior matters. It's just the reference remains.
Correct. The first 78 sections are remaining the same before this one.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
I do not see any other electronic hands, Mayor.
Okay, David, please pass on to George Waterman our deepest appreciation for the work he put into this.
Will do, Mayor.
Item C is beach access rules and parking. Before we get into this subject, let me just say that if you were to Google the term opening a beach during a pandemic, you would get 0 results. What we're doing is something we never anticipated we'd have to deal with. And just to pass on a little bit of frustration, the amount of guidance that we're getting from Trenton is fairly minimal. That's the governor's decision that the municipalities have the say in the beach openings this year. And so that has put the onus on us to do our best to figure this out, with the overriding factor being public safety, with whatever's second, a deep second. So our borough administrator, the Chief Guida, borough attorney, myself, members of council, we have been deeply involved in this process. And at this point, I'm going to ask our borough administrator to walk us through where we are right now.
Thank you, Mayor. As of last night, we prepared a Borough Bradley Beach COVID-19 guidelines for the summer 2020. There are a few sections, one being beach and boardwalk use, badge and parking sales, lifeguards and badge checkers, Fletcher Lake footbridge, transient guests or seasonal tenants, and the 4th of July fireworks. We're going to take this in sections. We will start with the beach and boardwalk use. I will run point by point just for the public's information. This document has only been disseminated to the governing body and administration at this time. This is a document that I prepared from several conversations with the chief, the mayor, the council, all in smaller conversations through the last 2 to 3 weeks. And hopefully at the end of tonight, we will have a final product that we can all agree on as a governing body, administration, and the residents of Bradley Beach.
Mr. Brown, let me just interject one point, and that is we are under a governor's state of emergency that was extended until, I believe, June 5th. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mayor. And that was, I believe it was Executive Order 138, which extended it. And at this time, this entire document is mainly based on local ordinances and primarily Executive Order 133. Just a quick background on Executive Order 133. That is the park status and standard for state parks and how the government was operating in the state parks. We brought a lot of this information into this document. However, we did change some to make sense because i.e. there's no swimming in the state parks, but obviously we want to allow swimming on our beaches. But the premises behind this was also in discussions with OEM that we have, and we stay close in line as much as possible to the executive order since we have not received the governor's guidance at this point. The first item is commencing at 9 a.m. on Saturday, May 23rd. The beach will be staffed and open to season badge holders. The second item is commencing at dusk on Monday, 25th, 2020. The beach will not be staffed on a daily basis and swimming will be prohibited. When we say that, I want to define it a little bit better, that we are going to be closed after Memorial Day weekend, but we will be open and staffed each weekend up until commencing at 9 a.m. on Thursday on June 18th. The beach will be staffed and open for the summer 2020 season. I'm going to stop at that point if there's any governing body comment.
Yeah, let me just jump in there. It's traditionally those dates reflected the closing of schools, and this is a great unknown, and that is with the fact that the schools will not reopen this year, and that many of their parents are also at home. I'm wondering what I have some concern. I know there's a cost aspect which concerns our CFO, and I just don't know what kind of utilization the beach is going to see on these weekends when technically the beach is not staffed and swimming is prohibited. And again, we're entering an unknown territory. My 2 cents is to err on the side of caution and to staff it. But there is a cost impact there. So I have some questions about that.
Any other governing? Go ahead.
Yeah, if I can, I'm not really in favor of prohibiting swimming during this time. I understand what the mayor just said. Yeah, in an ideal world, we just staff it the whole time through the week. I think it's a reasonable expectation that, we have lifeguards on the weekends. I just feel like when we don't have lifeguards there, as in during the week from, late May through early June, we are put up signs, we're clear, no lifeguards on duty, swim at your own risk. I just don't think it's right to say no swimming at all.
I have to agree with Councilman Weber. And I would point to the fact that, pandemic aside, we've never prohibited swimming after Labor Day when the water is still warm and a lot of people come down.
David, do you want to explain the genesis of the swimming prohibition?
Well, I think that was part of the executive order and the pandemic situation and trying to provide further safety for the beaches. I'd also defer if the chief would like to weigh in at this point as well.
You want to come up here?
With regard to the swimming during the weekdays, we're just trying to stay as close as David has said, we're just trying to stay as close to the governor's executive order as possible. We're trying to mirror that. This is still, everything we're about to do or about to discuss is still subject to the governor's edict, which is expected out sometime soon.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I can weigh in, I think, and Mr. Brown, as we go through all three of these pages, I think the overriding theme has got to be social distancing and, mitigating transmission, right? And most of these steps are intended to do that. So that said, when I think of swimming, I think I'm somewhere in the middle from what I've just heard. I get a little concerned about swimming, even in the course of when the beaches are open to the public on the weekends, when you get a lot of people body surfing, boogie boarding, crashing into one another. I wonder, is there a way that I think swimming on your own with adequate distance from others is perfectly fine. I don't like the idea of an absolute ban on swimming, whether it be certainly during the week and weekends. But I wonder if there's at least some wording we could put in that would require some degree of social distancing, even while in the water. My concern is, right now, if folks are in fact crashing into one another, kind of frolicking in the waves as we all like to do, I just think that is contra to the goals we're trying to achieve right now.
The stay-at-home orders are still in effect. And at this point in time, to waive the swimming order, which the governor has given us the ability so far to do, it's not something we should take lightly in this situation. Technically, we're still supposed to be home. We're not supposed to be out other than for exercise and some sunshine and things like that. But it's certainly, I believe, within this authority's reasoning to, we have the ability to either lighten or tighten up that edict.
Mr. Sexsmith, would you like to weigh in here?
I hear what the chief is saying, but I have to agree with my fellow council members on this. I think that outright restriction and ban of swimming is, that's the definition of being outside in the sunshine getting exercise.
So, correct me if I'm wrong. The trigger point for the June 18th date, or that Thursday in June, historically has been because schools were now closed. So again, I'll make the point that the schools are closed, and we can't sit here and say, well, June is going to be, it's not going to be that warm. We could have a 90-degree day on a weekday in June before the 18th, and there will be a lot of children on the beach with their families. And in that scenario, there is no staffing, and that concerns me.
And that's a concern every year, with or without the pandemic. And I will add, and it's straying a little way from the issue of the pandemic, but I will add that the tragedies that we've suffered here with regard to water incidents have happened on unprotected beaches, and primarily with children.
I remember in previous years for post-Labor Day coverage, we would pretty much let the weather report dictate whether or not we thought it would be appropriate to have some sort of coverage on the beach. And I would recommend something similar. If we know that 3 days out, you're going to see temperatures, say, above 80, then my opinion is you should have lifeguards on duty.
So, Mr. Mayor, just to be clear, I appreciate and applaud you and the chief raising safety concerns, but I was trying to distinguish between our ongoing practices and, specific practices that we want to engage for protecting our residents and one another from the virus. So what you're saying is, so I was really focused on social distancing, but allowing people to be in the water. You're actually suggesting, if I understand correctly, a change in what's been our ongoing policy because children will be out of school earlier. Is that the primary focus?
Yeah, I mean, the ongoing policy is based on a scenario that says the kids are still in school.
But it was swimming at your own risk, right? Primarily?
Well, they were in school, so there wasn't a lot of usage of the beach because they were still in school. So the scenario is if you have a very warm day during the first 2 weeks in June, people will gravitate towards the beach. And under this scenario, it is not staffed. I have concerns with that.
If we can come up and specify some kind of metric like that, Mr. Mayor, that's I think that's better than doing an outright ban. Let's to steal your phrase, it's close it or manage it. So I would prefer that we try and manage it.
And I would just add, of course, the scenario you're bringing up, Mr. Mayor, is what's safer. I'm just against the beaches are closed and there's no swimming whatsoever. Before the public comments, just want to throw this out. We don't know what kind of revenue is going to come in this year. Staffing the beaches with lifeguards when we normally don't, meaning weekdays, late May, early June, there's a cost to that. And just so everybody knows, if the beach budget goes into the red, there's no deficit spending. The town has to make it up. It comes out of people's taxes. It comes out of the current funds. So consider that, again, the mayor is suggesting what is imminently safer. If money was no object, I'd say, of course we do that. But as people comment, just consider where it's coming from.
David, is it your, David, I'll ask you and the chief, do we anticipate any additional guidance prior to Memorial Day weekend from Trenton on this particular issue?
According to the governor's office, they're supposed to issue the guidance right prior to Memorial Day weekend. But unfortunately, we can't wait that long to get our policy set up because this whole entire policy backs into us completing the budget and having a good introduced budget.
Okay, so we've had some good conversation on this. Let's go with item number 4, please.
Okay, item number 4 is that we'll have all access points will be open and taking the council president's comments From north to south, we'll have Cliff Avenue, Newark Avenue, Park Place, Ocean Park, McCabe, Lorraine, Brindley, 4th Avenue, 3rd Avenue, 2nd Avenue, and Evergreen. All will be open and access points to the beach. The beach will remain in park status and engage in passive recreational activities in which social distancing can be readily achieved. The following shall remain closed: picnic areas and playgrounds. The boardwalk, pavilions, and restrooms will be open with a proactive cleaning process in place for the bathrooms. Also, a very proactive cleaning strategy will be implemented by the Department of Public Works. It is recommended that all beachgoers and boardwalk participants wear face masks, and available parking must be limited to 50% of the maximum capacity, which is basically every other space will be closed except spaces along Sylvan Lake.
And you're just referring to the pay parking on the east end of Ocean Avenue and the large lot on the north end, correct?
Correct, Mayor. I'm going to stop at that point if there's any conversation, discussion amongst the governing body.
Yeah, I understand that the limiting of parking to 50% is also coming from the governor's office. And I'm struggling with this one because if the goal is to send a message that that beach towns do not want their usual amount of people, in our situation, all this does is send the parking down the residential areas. So I really don't have a lot to say in that because we'd have to adhere to what the governor is asking us to do. But a blanket policy like this is counterproductive, I think. But it is what it is.
Again, Mayor, this is what they're doing in the state parks on Executive Order 133.
Sure.
You can revisit this if and when the governor's office finally releases their guidance.
Right. I'm just venting to you, Dave.
Okay, Mayor.
So can I just add on the parking thing? It's a county road. Would we even be able to just say, every other space is not an option without asking the county?
Well, if you consider the fact that Avon is going to totally close theirs, as is Spring Lake, then clearly the towns have the flexibility to do that. Chief?
Well, if the governor determines that that's the way he wants it, and he puts that in an executive order, the county's not gonna have anything to say about it.
So that begs the question, because I'm concerned about the spillover effect from an Avon policy. If the governor's saying that 50%, it must be limited to 50%, can someone say, no, we're gonna limit it to 100%? In other words, does 50% no parking mean you must have 50% parking available?
Mayor, I would answer that with the normal comment, and Greg could correct me if I'm wrong, but you could be more restrictive, but you wouldn't be able to say 25% because that would go against the governor's edict, but you can go 51% plus, be more restrictive as a local municipality.
All right. So we just talked about the access points, the park status, the picnic areas and the playgrounds, the cleaning of the boardwalk, pavilions, and the restrooms. Any other council comment on those points?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have a handful of comments. One question, we're talking about having the beaches open, and I don't know if we address this later. I don't think we do, but have we given any thought to social distancing for our employees, including lifeguards? Lifeguards sitting 4 on a chair, badge takers being 2 in a booth. Is there any social distancing / mask requirements that we are considering?
Yeah, those discussions are ongoing with the beach manager and the administration.
I think those should be a part of our rules, Mr. Brown.
They will be, because it's more, it has to be handled in a personnel manner.
Okay. The reference to the beach will remain in park status and engage in passive recreational activities in which social distancing can be readily achieved. I know later we say, when I first read that and I saw the passive recreational activities, I was wondering how passive. For example, is sitting to be allowed on the beach? I think later we say it is allowed. I just wanted to confirm that there's no inconsistency. People will be allowed to sit socially distanced in the appropriately defined groups.
That is correct.
My only other question or comment really is the reference to the proactive cleaning. It reads, I think, a bit redundant. We say that we're going to have proactive cleaning process in place, and then we say also a very proactive cleaning strategy. And I was just wondering if we could consolidate that into one very proactive cleaning process, strategy and process, whatever.
You ratted me out, Councilman. I just saw that myself.
Okay.
So I will be making that change.
If we're going to allow people to sit on the beach, we have to take out the word passive.
The word passive is for recreational activities.
Could someone help me define what a passive recreational activity is? Mean like walking?
Exactly. There is a definition in 133, which I don't have in front of me. And I think as we move down here, we'll talk about it more. It's basically the activities that are allowable versus the activities that are not allowable, which is like, we won't be able to probably do mini golf. We won't be able to play volleyball. We won't be able to do those type of things, whereby you could walk, jog, do those type of activities on the beach, as long as social distancing is placed.
Yeah, if I can, I think Councilman Bonnell's right, at least with respect to this executive order. It defines, again, this is in respect to state parks, but it says passive recreational activities in which social distancing can be readily achieved. Fishing, hunting, boating, canoeing, hiking, walking, all these things, sitting on a beach is not in this list. So I think he's right. If we've said passive recreation, that wouldn't be what we're after here. Like just, we could get rid of the word passive. I think we're okay.
Well, that EO is concerning the parks, and as I said, we want to stay as close as we can to the parks. We want to mirror that with those regulations. But as of right now, the governor is giving us the ability to open the beach and for us to make a determination on whether or not people can sit on a beach. And that is consistent with just about every other municipality in the county on the ocean. So, I mean, I'm not so sure that passive is I'll defer to the borough attorney if he thinks that's that big of an obstacle. I'll defer to him.
My only concern is the confusion that it may cause. I don't disagree that we shouldn't have volleyball and close contact activities, but if we say passive in one and then allow non-passive in another section.
Well, again, I don't know that it's non-passive. I mean, how much passive is it to sit in one spot? I don't know. I'll defer to the borough attorney.
Yeah, maybe there's a better word.
I was just about to suggest that. Let me and Greg put our heads together and see if we can come up with something better.
Okay, let's pick it up with beach blankets.
Yep. Beach blankets, chairs, and coolers are allowed. Everyone must practice social distancing, stay 6 feet apart whenever practical, including immediate family members, caretakers, household members, or romantic partners while on the beach. No organized or contact activities or sports shall be allowed. Bocce court, mini golf, volleyball, surf camp shall remain closed, and gatherings of individuals are prohibited.
So,
go ahead, Mayor.
Maybe this is covered somewhere else. Would we would we consider people in line for a concession if and when they open and they're observing social distancing? We wouldn't consider that a gathering, would we?
I am not the chief, but I would say no, as long as they mark out their concession, almost like when we go to the stores these days, there's cones 6 feet apart or some sort of marking on the ground to establish that 6 feet. I think we would be in order.
And I'm assuming that we have not had conversations with the concession for the mini golf or the volleyball. or the
We
service.
started conversations today. The mini golf actually handed in a plan that they would like to do, but in accordance with the executive order, and I applaud them for putting the plan together, I don't think we can allow them to open at this time while we're under the executive order. So we will review their plan, and I have to get that over to the chief and OEM for their review. And then at the proper time, we could open up the concession.
David,
Or the mini
would you
golf,
like
I should say, to be
similar-
specific.
Would you like a similar plan from the surf camp? Because I would imagine there's a way that they can, it's not a contact sport. I would imagine there's a way that they could limit people and keep social distancing even in their surf camps. I mean, they got a pretty big tent there when they're out.
Yes, I tasked personnel in the front office today to begin to call the concessions as per my discussion with the mayor, and also the other activities that are out there to see if we can get plans from them as well. Or
Okay.
at least let us know. Some may even decide that they may not even open until
And
this is all over.
Just for clarity, that would be for after the state of emergencies, over assuming June 6th, right?
Yes, unless it's extended.
Any council questions or comments with regards to the bullet points just covered?
One question I wanted to ask was, and I realized Mr. Mayor was actually a bullet point covered last round, but the notion of it's recommended that beachgoers and boardwalk participants wear a face mask. I don't know what the chief would say about our ability to enforce something stronger than that, but my inclination would be to at least, I'd like to see us say face masks are required, at least on the boardwalk, not only to protect people from one another, but to protect our employees. Is that something that could be enforced?
I'm going to say no, because there's certain people cannot wear a mask, and that's probably the reason why the governor just doesn't outright demand everyone to wear a mask. But I'm going to say no. That would be problematic in enforcement.
I also think that the individuals that are compromised and cannot wear a mask are going to encounter significantly elevated problems when the temperatures go up and the humidity goes up. I would be one of those people.
I guess as I read through this, when I anticipate that we are going to have swarms of people, whether, I know we're focused on the period up until June 5th, but the reality is, this challenge we're going to face is going to go well beyond June 5th, regardless of what the governor's mandate is going forward. I just feel as though, in general, we're trying to strike a balance, but I feel as though we're not perhaps being as strong in our desire to communicate, social distancing and what, for example, practicing the wearing of masks. So maybe we could, I think, Mr. Weber, you had earlier, just in a conversation we had, you had mentioned even including the word strongly recommend. I don't know how much we could push that, but I'd like to see something that makes our position, that much more clear around social distancing and just trying to mitigate transmission of the virus.
Strongly is good.
I can put strongly in there.
Yeah, like to have required, but understand the challenges.
David?
And also, just for a point of reference, I've been in discussions with the supervisor of Public Works, and we're going to have a lot of signage out there that will also be redundant to what we're talking about now. So the signage will be out there regarding social distancing, as well as strongly recommending to wear a cloth mask, and all the other points like washing your hands constantly and the like.
Mr. Brown, can our concessions, those that are allowed to open, can they require the wearing of a mask in order to serve the public?
That is a requirement.
It is a requirement. Very good.
I would like to see that in their plan.
Yeah, I would also require that either through DPW or on their own, that a lot of the blockage that you see at grocery stores and at everywhere now, you see some sort of a plexiglass or a film blockage that blocks transmission. We should have same setups for our concessions.
Yeah, we'll have stronger stance over our employees and the concessions.
Okay, David, you can keep going.
Okay. The beach will remain off limits nightly between dusk and dawn. Locker rentals are available and social distancing expected when in use. Beach showers will be available. Water fountains will not be available. Boardwalk benches will not be in use. And bicycles are banned from use on the boardwalk. And that's the end of that section, so we can discuss those last 6 points.
So on the dusk to dawn, I just want to hear a little more. I'd be curious if we're thinking of that for a certain time frame of the calendar. Like, is that only until the governor's state of emergency ends, June 6th? Chief, do you have a comment on that?
I believe everything we're talking about is until the declaration is rescinded. That's how I see it. I don't know, maybe the counselor would want to comment.
Well, I just want to say, normally I wouldn't want to, limit being on the beach in the evening. I don't think it should be illegal to be on the beach in the evening. But if we're talking about this limited time period until the executive order, the state of emergency is rescinded, then, I'm actually okay with that one.
I take it that way too, Council President.
To follow on to Mr. Weber's comment, so my understanding is the executive order says the curfew starts at 8 p.m. Is that correct?
No.
No, that's for businesses, Councilman.
Okay, it's just businesses then. All right.
No, with regard to, we're talking about the beach, correct?
Yes, sir.
As they
Yes,
apply.
that's just one of the requirements we're making tonight.
That's the same requirement as the parks.
And that would be for the length of this declaration, the local declaration, disaster declaration.
That's the same limitation that's currently on the parks, correct? Dusk till dawn? Or
Yes,
dusk till something?
Yes.
I believe
yes.
it is. I'm not exactly sure. I believe it is though.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Brown, the one item on this last list that you walked us through that just strikes me as inconsistent with all the others is that we would keep the beach showers available. Is there any reason why we wouldn't consider actually shutting off the water and just not encouraging people to share runoff water from the shower?
There was many theories behind this, and one of the theories was that if we don't have the shower on and having somebody from Public Works maintain it from a cleanliness standpoint, that people may run into the restrooms and cause havoc in there by trying to wash off the sand in the restrooms.
I feel like we're just inviting people to share, droplets, if you will. I don't know. I mean, I'm the first one to use the showers along with everyone else to wash the sand off, but I mean, if we just close down the showers, I like to think it's one less opportunity for people to risk, transmission of the virus. That's just my reaction. I'd like to hear other thoughts.
Well,
I'm not married to this, so I'd like to hear from the rest of the governing body.
Well, I just think, if somebody's paying to use our beach, there's a certain expectations they have. And I think one expectation would be the ability to wipe off their kids coming off the beach. We could certainly put some signage that says, please use your towel, put your towel over the knobs to turn on and off or something like that. But I think having a shower is a natural expectation for a beachgoer, regardless of whether they live.
I made a suggestion this week that it would be pretty simple for the DPW to put a remote on-off switch valve to where the beach badge checker sits, and you can eliminate the touch issue with the valve, but you're never going to eliminate the fact that there's a puddle of water that everybody's going to be standing in at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. There's going to be 100 people in an hour standing in that puddle of water. So I don't know that it's really going to do any good to take any measures against the showers other than just turning them off altogether.
Have we reached out to the health department to see if they have any kind of guidance on that?
Great idea. I will do that first thing tomorrow morning.
Thank you, sir.
All right, David.
Okay, moving to badge and parking sales. Beach badges for seasonal are on sale via Viply on their website or the app, and by cashier at the Brindley Avenue booth on the boardwalk, and by cash at 3rd Avenue and Cliff Avenue booths on the boardwalk. The maximum badge sales limit will be established by a formula that anticipates utilization of seasonal badges. Maximum beach badge sales for all days will be capped at a projected max attendance of 6,000. Online sales of seasonal badges will end at midnight on Friday, May 22nd. Each beach day overall capacity will be monitored regularly. Determinations will be made if needed to reduce or restrict access to certain beaches. Distribution of badges are currently occurring at the following locations: 3rd Avenue, Cliff Avenue, and Brindley Avenue. And Viply sales from Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And pay stations shall be in operation from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. from the Saturday of the weekend before Memorial Day weekend to the Sunday after Labor Day. And finally, parking may be purchased at the meters or the M2 Pay app.
Do we indicate whether what the when we sell daily badges, do we indicate if we're only going to do that through Viply, or do we plan to allow cash sales of daily badges?
Mayor, you're talking subsequent to Memorial Day weekend?
No, when we decide to start the sale of daily badges.
Oh, I would predict that we would be able to do cash as well.
Well, if my concern there is if you have an established number, a finite number of daily badges, the benefit to running all daily badges through Viply is that they can keep a running count. And we also prevent someone making plans to come here and driving an hour and then getting here and we've sold all the daily badges. But I can go either way. My preference would be that we run all daily badges through the Viply app, so that we have a count, and that we're minimizing the interaction of cashiers with the general public, handling cash, etc. That's one point. The other point is that I would like to see some language with regards to the established number of 6,000 that gives us the ability to have ongoing monitoring to see if that does turn out to be an appropriate number. Right now, it's a swag at what we think is a good number on the beach, and we need to have the flexibility to adjust that.
Yes, Mayor, I concur with you with the Viply. I have no problem doing everything through Viply if that's the wishes of the consensus of the governing body. And we do have some language at the end of the document, which basically says that, we'll be reevaluating these guidelines, based on the reopening of the beaches guidelines from the governor, and as well as the stay-at-home order but maybe I'll add a third line in there that will state that we'll just revisit certain aspects of this, as well as, because each day is going to be different policies keep coming down. So this is a working document, basically.
And then I'll, to counter my own argument, the primary downside to running all daily badges through VIPLE is that it's going to take a significant PR effort to make sure that anyone considering Bradley Beach is fully aware of how it's going to operate.
True.
Just a quick logistical question about VIPLE. Is there some sort of, I've heard this from the seasonal sales so far, that there's some sort of a lag between when a person purchases a seasonal badge, at least, and when the badge is available on the boardwalk for pickup. Is there, in fact, a lag of a few days?
I would think so, because once it goes through, then we have to take care of it on our end. Actually, is the CFO Sandy Rice on the call?
I'm here.
It was.
I'm
You're
here.
probably better equipped to answer this than me.
So there generally isn't a lag. There was, with the influx of people trying to buy badges, the people in the office at Borough Hall got a little bit backed up with preparing the badges for distribution. Now that we've kind of gotten over that first day hump with all of the beach badge sales, there should be no lag in when somebody buys a beach badge. It should be readily available.
So if people were able to buy daily, again, now I'm switching from seasonal, but if they're able to purchase daily the evening before, the day before, there should be no problem having that available for them the following day.
No.
That's correct. In my conversations with the folks from VIPLE, the window for purchasing a badge for the next day would commence with the 5 o'clock on the previous day. So we would encourage people to literally make a reservation to come to the beach.
I have a number of questions and or concerns with this entire section. So should I just dive in really quick and get the various issues out there?
Sure.
There seems, I'm not sure if there's inconsistency or maybe lack of clarity, but we talk about different locations, right? The first bullet references when things will be available by cash at Brindley Ave booth on the boardwalk and by cash at 3rd and Cliff. And then a few 4 or 5 bullets down, we say distribution badges are currently occurring at 3rd Ave Cliff and Brindley, only VIPLE on such and such. And I think there might have even been one other reference, perhaps not, but at a minimum, we should probably have greater clarity, just one bullet, for example, that talks about specific availability of badges. Another issue, and I know I'm very likely the source of the number 6,000 because there was some preliminary analysis that I had worked on. But I think I'd just like to echo what others were saying, that for purposes of this discussion, we should probably say there would be a defined limit. But Mr. Mayor, I think as you were saying, let's spend a little more time working on that number to make sure that 6,000 is the right amount or that it should be another. Related to that, the reference was to badge sales. And I think what we're really talking about is bodies on the beach. And there can be obviously badge sales that children accompany an adult and they don't buy a badge. Various badges are, for example, seasonal badges are a one-time sale, but we don't know what percentage of those seasonal badges will show up on any given day at the beach. So for that day, they wouldn't be a sale. So I think we just have to get our terminology a little clearer. That probably would reference, a maximum attendance. And I know Mr. Bennell had been doing some work on, looking at like Google Maps and figuring out square footage and allowing for social distancing. So I just think the structure of this bullet should be revamped to reference a target limit on the attendees. And from there, we can back into what that means for sales. I guess the biggest question I want to raise for everyone and for the public to consider is the notion of limiting beach access to the sale of seasonal badges only. My own suggestions, and I did have a chance to chat briefly with Mr. Mayor and the chief about this, but I personally feel that there should be some small limited allocation of daily badge sales as well. I know there's been some discussion about this is just under the executive order, and maybe this will change come June 5th. But I'm fairly confident we'll be able to measure what's an appropriate amount of attendance at the beach. And once we've defined that and we know what our seasonal sales are, it may be a modest number, but whether it's, let's call it 500, if not, as much as no more than 1,000, but I'll throw out a number 500 to get primarily because I just have a concern that the beach is a public beach. It should be available to the public. There is all sorts of case law and the public trust doctrine that that we're all, I know, intimately familiar with, that at least suggests that we might be discriminating against folks outside of Bradley. And while I very strongly believe we need to protect our own residents and our own employees, number one, I think it's foolhardy to not make a small allocation of daily badges available because I don't think we'll be at any risk at all of hitting a maximum. And I think it is a demonstration of good faith that we are still trying to maintain the public trust and make available to the public broadly, perhaps outside of Bradley, give them that same access opportunity that folks within Bradley have. So I'd like to throw that out there to get a reaction from others.
Yeah, thanks, Al. I actually agree with that last point. Although, I think if we did just limit it to season badge holders, we'd be okay. I don't, just for the time being, until that early June state of emergency is over, I wouldn't worry about a lawsuit on that. But I think we're okay with the limited number, like you say like 500 badges. After the state of emergency is lifted, then I think we'll have an idea. Can we make it more? Can we make it 1,000? Whatever. And I do appreciate the point that this one part of the document where we're talking about the attendance and the badges are different numbers. The attendance on the beach, if that's X, I think the number of badges sold has to be, my estimate is about 40% less of that, because people bring in seniors that don't need badges, people bring in kids that don't need badges, things like that. So, and I'd be very much in favor of only selling those daily badges through the Viply app. For the mayor mentioned the benefits of that, but there's an additional benefit that keeps our people, our employees, from contacting people, touching them, touching credit cards, touching cash. Just do it on your app. It's that much less touching. It's not no touching because they got to walk up to the booth and get the badge. I realize that, but there's just less. I think it's better. So, and if we could clarify, when you say pay stations, is that only referring to the parking meters? And I just want to make sure people cannot buy a beach badge through the parking meter, correct? I live here. I've never done either. So I just want to make sure that that's the case. And that's it.
They have been able to in the past. We'd have to shut that option down.
I would like to shut that option down then.
So a couple of questions. It says that we're stopping sale of seasonal badges on Friday, May 22nd. Is there any intention to offer seasonal badges for sale again after Memorial Day weekend?
I think part of that was for us to take a hard look and review. And based on, like, if we use the 6,000 attendance, right now we have almost close to 4,000 seasonal badges sold. So we need to take a breath and take a step back and kind of reevaluate. Okay. Council President and Councilman Gudutosi made good points. We have veterans, seniors, children, There's a whole host of others who are able to get on the beach without a badge. So we need to make sure that we keep the number under control.
And I would, with that in mind, I think we should consider, based on that analysis, we should consider reopening season badge sales up to some capped maximum amount. This is silent on when we're going to put daily badges for sale. So it's the assumption is that when the executive order is lifted, the emergency is lifted, is when we're going to start selling daily badges. Is that correct?
That's what I'm hearing from the governing body.
So what? So everybody talks about the emergency being lifted on the 5th of June. What if it's not lifted till the 4th of July? I think we need to, if we're going to limit it to season badge holders only for the first 2 weeks, I think we need to specify, add some more specificity in there as to putting daily sales in, so that there's, if we don't do it on Memorial Day weekend, I think that we need to add that specificity in there. Just so we've got a more structured plan going forward. And I think those were my only comments.
Yeah, the only other point I want to make is that season badge holders should understand that they have, for lack of a better term, a guaranteed reservation, because when we make an assumption of what percentage of season badge holders would go on a Saturday in July, then that is subtracted from what we view as the safe amount, and the remaining balance to maybe make an allowance for military and seniors and a certain age children, then that is your cap number for daily badge sales. So one of the benefits of a seasonal badge is that you have a guaranteed spot on the beach.
I just wanted to go back and say to Councilman Gubatose, I accept all of your clarification points that you raised. Each one came to my mind as I was reading it too. It became a little cloudy myself. So I will definitely work with you and probably the CFO and the chief on trying to make some better statement and language there.
I just want to echo what Mr. Sexsmith said, which is I am very interested in seeing if we can create rules that we think make sense for dealing with the pandemic with less focus. I understand we are all listening to the governor and we're waiting for periodic updates, but if it makes sense to sell daily badges on June 6th, then it should make sense to sell them on June 3rd or not, and limit them or not. So the distinctions we're making around, when the governor is next likely to announce whether we continue to stay at home or not, to me seems somewhat arbitrary. I'd rather just have what we all deem to be a sound policy before and after, leading up to and following June 5th.
I think that the increased risk selling a minimal amount of daily badges is very small in the grand scheme. And there's no reason we shouldn't insulate ourselves against discrimination lawsuits by allowing that from day one. If it's 500 badges, that's fine. Now we've insulated ourselves. If we decide it's 1,000 or 1,500 or 50, but we need to sell daily badges, or we're putting ourselves at a risk that we don't need to.
David?
If there's no further comment on this section, I'll move on to the next section, which is pretty self-explanatory and easy. The lifeguards and the badge checkers They'll be directed to follow the best practices for reopening beach operations. This was sent to the Bradley Beach Police Department, OEM, as well as myself from the JIF. The Mel Safety Institute issued a bulletin, and the bulletin has various information in here, especially related to training on COVID-19, transmission signs of illness and reporting, that we expect that all the lifeguards and the badge checkers will have to take this training in the course of the next couple of weeks and beyond as we get into the beach season. The next one is the Fletcher Lake Footbridge. We just had some issues there with some gatherings. And basically what we're asking here is that the bridge will remain open to pedestrian crossing. No stopping or social gatherings allowed, and it's recommended that cloth masks will be worn. We'll be asking Department of Public Works to put signage up to reflect that, to make sure that we're protecting all of our residents and citizens of Bradley Beach. Transient guests or seasonal tenants, the chief and I are recommending, and we're anticipating that we'll be able to start issuing certificate of occupancies again on Tuesday, May 26th. And finally, the 4th of July fireworks, the governing body and administration, we have the ability to make the decision to proceed with the 4th of July fireworks to be determined no later than Friday, June 26th, which is 1 week prior to 4th of July. That will keep us in good standing with the vendors and be as something at a no cost to the borough if we decided to move the date. And that concludes the document. Any questions on those last 4 points?
Yes, David, once again, I have a handful. The transient guests or seasonal tenants. So that statement, I understand that we're contemplating removing the restriction on short-term rentals. So at a minimum, I guess the word anticipated had past tense and probably means that we should just say the borough, will, I don't know, remove the prohibition or whatever.
Yeah, I put anticipated because the chief and I were still in discussions about this, but we were, I would say, and he's here, we were like 95% kind of there for that date, but wanted to have this discussion tonight and, from an OEM perspective on finalizing it.
Is this, if we were to do that, would that be inconsistent with the, with footnote 13's reference to Executive Order 108? Is that executive order still in effect?
Well, Executive Order 108 and then Administrative Order 2020-8 gives the restrictions to power to the municipality.
We can do it or not.
Okay.
The governor's given us the ability to do it, if that's what we choose to do.
Like everything we're discussing is very challenging. I'm very anxious to hear the residents' feedback on all of this. We're trying to make really challenging decisions that don't really have clear right or wrong answers. I get, and I understand that many of our residents rely upon short-term rentals for some amount of income. That said, this feels inconsistent to me. If our goal is to minimize volume to the beach and to best manage it, especially if we're planning to limit sales of daily badges and perhaps seasonal. So it feels inconsistent. I guess my own reaction would have been to expect us to extend the prohibition that I know the mayor has established. So I'd like just to hear more conversation from others, but my personal feeling on this would be that we might want to extend the prohibition on short-term rentals at least until early June and see what direction we're heading. And the one other thing on this page, I love the footnote, the guidelines will be reevaluated. I think that's appropriate. I was wondering if we could have another statement of some sort, more or less saying non-compliance for any of these rules, however we formulate them, that non-compliance on a large scale would result in the modification of the rules and implementation of greater restrictions, just because I'd like the public to know that if these things aren't working, and the mayor said this earlier, but I'd like it to be a very bold statement that says, subject to modification and restriction if you don't comply.
Accepted.
I would like to hear others' thoughts on the short-term rentals, if you have them.
Well, that's really the only area I've got concern with on this page. You know, the social distancing rules tell us that we're only supposed to be, you know, in close contact with members of our households, our caregivers, our significant others, etc. So I'm wondering if we're looking at some kind of a occupation limit, you know, for the short-term rentals. You know, if a family's coming down for a weekend, that's fine. But if 10 friends are coming down for a weekend, that's violating the executive order, to my understanding. And that's one of the things that poses some risk.
Well, that would be handled in the CO process. And then we would know that there would be 10 people there and we would be able to limit who the number in going into that household.
Okay. The other thing in this, I think, or whatever date that actually gets rescinded. That's all I have.
Back to you, Mayor.
Okay, David, do you have enough to for a revision?
Whole lot.
Okay, well, now there might be even more because we're going to open it up for public comment.
Okay, we have a few hands raised. We have Patty. Patty, we can hear you.
No, we can't.
Oh, I'm sorry. I yield my point. Sorry.
Okay. Next up, we have a Don on his iPhone.
Hey guys, it's Don Greenberg, 302 Park Place Ave. Boy, where to start? I guess let's start with the masks. I think the chief was saying that you can't enforce it or mandate it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it already is being enforced and mandated in stores. So why couldn't we enforce it on the boardwalk and on the beach? The precedent exists because the governor's already said you have to have a mask on if you go into a store. You have to have a mask on when you pick up food. So that's point one. And what about the enforcement of social distancing on the beach? How is that going to be done? I mean, I can see fistfights breaking out when, you know, hey, you're too close to me. You know, you got to move. I don't have to move. I'm not close to you. You know, I see that as being a real morass, a real quicksand pile. How's that going to be done? And as far as badges, can't you just keep your badge on your phone on the Viply app? Don't they offer that as an option instead of actually having to go pick up a physical badge? I mean, you know, when I go to a concert, I have the ticket on my phone. It doesn't Viply offer that option. And as far as daily sales, I agree with what the councilmen were saying. It is discriminatory against people who can't afford a seasonal badge. And I know we're in special circumstances, but it's something you need to think about when you're deciding whether to do daily badges or not. And my wife had a great idea in terms of being able to get the right data and count how many people are on the beach. Issue either via the app or a physical badge, a zero price badge for children and adults, children and military and people who don't need a badge. Issue a badge with a number, but no cost. What else? I think bicycles, just a question. Is that banning of bicycles, period, or is it the same as it used to be? They have to be off by 10 o'clock.
That's
my list.
our ordinance is, as of May 15th, bicycles are not allowed on the boardwalk.
Well,
At all.
excuse me, Mr.
Okay.
Mayor, I think they're allowed at certain hours. It's not that they're not allowed at all. They're allowed at certain
Allowed.
hours.
They're
And
allowed.
I have a similar question to Don. I'd like to make it so they're allowed, but the same, the hourly, and if we have to revisit it, that's fine. I'm just not in favor of banning them altogether, so.
Thanks for that answer, John. So if anybody else wants to answer my other list of questions.
Sure. Well, let's talk about the mask. There is no mandatory mask law. If you go
There is if you go in a store.
No, there isn't.
Yes, there is.
If you don't want to if you cannot wear a mask, the store is obligated to make arrangements to get that.
Correct. That is correct,
So-
Chief, but only if you can't wear one. Why can't we do the same thing for the beach and the boardwalk?
How do I enforce that? How do I know if you can wear one or not? If you have COPD, how do I know that?
Yeah, I guess you could ask, but and that was part of my question. How do you enforce it? I realize it's insanely tough.
Too many people not wearing them.
But when my wife and I went for a walk on the boardwalk last week, it was a Thursday, I think, at 8 a.m. I would say maybe 10% of the people were wearing masks.
Yeah,
I mean, we had somebody riding a bike go by us about a foot from my wife's shoulder. First of all, they didn't let us know they were behind us. No, they didn't say on your left. And they weren't wearing a mask. And when I said something to the guy, he basically flipped me off and said, screw you. But I mean, I think we have to do something to drive it home that this is something you need to do, whether it's by enforcement or by putting stronger language on the signs. I don't know what it is, but it's got to be something.
Sure. So that's all acceptable. We can do all that. But again, we cannot mandate that someone wears a mask. And as far as the social distancing and fights on the beach, well, we get that now anyway, without the pandemic. So I mean, we handle those situations as they come up.
How will that be handled though? Because it's going to come up more now, and the consequences of not social distancing are a little more drastic now. Before, if you got too close to somebody, maybe it messed up your day. Now it could mess up your life.
So if there's an issue where someone is not social distancing or physical distancing, then the person who's concerned certainly has the right and the ability to call us and let us know. But we will be proactive as well. We will be out there and determining whether or not a particular group is too close to one another. And we will take that upon us to straighten out.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Chief, I totally get it's uncharted territory. It's insanely tough, but I was just curious about what we were going to be doing on those, on those topics. Thanks for your answer. I appreciate that.
Yeah, just for everybody's education on this, per the rules and regs for the beachfront areas and adjacent waters, bicycles may be ridden on the promenade or public land between the hours of 12 midnight and 10 a.m. from May 15th through September 15th. And they're allowed, they're the only thing that's allowed to be ridden the rest of the year with no time restrictions.
Okay. Thanks, Tim. And what about the badges on the Vipley app? Is that something that can be done? Maybe the CFO can answer that.
What exactly is the question?
So instead of having to give somebody a physical badge, Mayor, why can't we just put it on the app? You show your phone to the badge checker.
Well, one of the challenges is that people come and go. And somebody, like if I'm a parent, I could purchase multiple badges on my phone. And so then they have a badge, but if the kids are going back and forth to the restroom,
Yeah, true. Okay. And at least it should be an option. Say you have just a couple, 2 adults, they each have a badge. I mean, that would cut down on contact.
Yeah, and I'm sure that this is going to be a real learning year with regards to Vipley and what they can pull off. And we may find ourselves making some of these things permanent only because it makes sense going forward.
And what else?
Okay. Up next, we
can you
have,
do the zero price badges? can you do the zero price badges to help you guys count? Is that something you could check out with Viply?
For our accounting purposes, every badge has a value to it.
Or a wristband or something?
No, that's what I mean, the
Just a
wristband.
thought. Yeah, just a thought, you know?
Okay.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate all your answers and appreciate how hard you guys are all working at this. I'm sure the new council members are sorry that they ever ran at this point.
David, who's got their hands up?
All right, we have Paul.
I assume you mean me.
Yes.
Hampton 411 and a half Lorraine Avenue. Thank you for trying to tackle what I think is an insoluble problem. One of the things that occurs to me is, how can we enforce any of these regulations? Who is going to be capable of enforcement?
The police department with the specials.
How many specials? How many police departments on duty during the day?
Chief?
It varies, but if you have a specific question with regard to how we're going to enforce it, we will have the manpower available, and we will utilize the tools that we have in the department, such as a drone and other things, to observe and to make determinations on whether or not somebody is maybe too close to another group or something like that. So we will be proactive.
Well, something as simple as the badge checkers. I mean, basically, we can't obviously require them to really enforce stopping people from coming on the beach who don't have a badge. And that's going to happen this year. You're going to have crowds of people on our boardwalk.
That happens every year.
I know, but we're going to have more. We're going to have more crowds of people on our boardwalk who do not have tickets to come on the beach, do not have badges, who are going to say, look, I drove all the way here. I don't know about social media. I'm here. I want to go on the beach, and you're not going to stop me. You're going to have real nastiness going on this year.
Undoubtedly, but we'll deal with it.
Well, those are good words, but I really feel that this may be a disaster.
What do you suggest?
Well, I hate to say it, but I mean, New York City, of course, has closed the beaches for the entire summer. Trying to keep them open, I really want to do that. However, obviously it's going to cost us a great deal of money to do that. And I don't know if we have enforceable rules that we're setting up. I have a lot of other points, but I'd like to ask other people to comment.
David?
Okay, you done, Paul? All right, we're up to Mary Ann.
Thank you, David. Mary Ann Spillman, 902 Ocean Avenue. Boy, I really, my heart goes out to you, all of you having to make these difficult decisions. But in terms of the last comment on enforcement, to some extent, you really do have to count on people being willing to follow the rules. So most people, I think, will, and it's going to be the few people that give a hard time and create enforcement problems. But I really do believe that most people will want to follow the rules if they're very clear. And so I wanted to comment on this. I wasn't sure that any decision was made, but this no swimming versus swimming at some period of time, I don't think we want to eliminate people from swimming because they do that in the parks. The parks have lakes, they have still water. We're talking about an ocean with moving water all the time. I don't think we should be looking at the same kinds of swimming restrictions in the ocean as you would in a park at a lake. So I think that limiting swimming, as some of you have said, would really take the whole point of being at the beach and at the ocean out of it. That's why people come. So I would hate to see no swimming, posted during this, I think you were talking about the period until June 8th or June 5th, whatever the executive order ends. But I think that's a bit different for an ocean side area than it would be for a state park. And those I know we're trying to model after the state parks, but I think this is very, very different. So I would object to having no swimming at all. And the other discussion about the showers, I agree with whoever it was that said that if you shut off the water to the showers, people are they want to wash their kids off. They want to wash their hands and feet off. They're going to go into the restrooms. It's going to be much more crowded in there. And it's going to be a real nightmare to keep clean if you don't have the showers available for people. So you can give instructions on how to use them or do something to monitor it. But I would really think it's a mistake to turn off the water in the showers for people who need to get washed off after the beach. In terms of the seasonal badges, are we assuming that seasonal badges are only bought by residents? Because I think anybody can go in and buy seasonal badges, can they not?
That's correct.
Yeah. So all we're doing then is separating the people who are willing or able to pay the full seasonal price from those who might want to do a daily badge. So I do see the potential sense of discrimination there. But if you're setting a quota, you have to set it on something. So seasonal badges, you know how those have been sold. So you have to use that as the base for determining how many daily badges you're able to sell. And I think that's a sound approach. And I don't think it would be setting anybody up for legal action because you have to have a quota. So the question is, how do you set that quota? And you know what your badge sales are when you've got seasonal badges, at least for some period of time. And I didn't hear when the seasonal badges will stop being sold. Was that, I thought it was this Friday, the 15th, but it's going to be the 22nd. That's, I think, different from what's been posted.
You are correct. The 22nd is a recommendation from the administration.
Okay, so it's going to be expanded beyond what's currently being said.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. I don't envy anybody having to put these rules together, but I do hope we'll be able to count on people being willing to abide by the rules. That's all.
Thank you. Next up, we have Cindy.
Hi, thank you. I don't envy any of you. On any given day, my opinion on this topic changes. And even from minute to minute on each of these issues, you all swayed me in my decisions. So I will support whatever our leadership decides is in my best interest as a citizen of Bradley Beach. I just wanted to weigh in. I added to the group chat while the discussion of passive recreation was being discussed, and there are several online definitions from various reputable groups, and most of them cite nature observation as a passive recreation. And I think one of the main reasons we all go to the beach is to enjoy the beauty of the nature that surrounds us. Other definitions included a means or activities that allow one to restore their strength, spirit, and vitality. And that, for me as a healthcare worker, is the only reason I've been going to the beach of late. I've been enjoying the beach, fortunately, from my balcony because I don't want to put others at risk by going up to the beach at this point. But I think those definitions of passive recreation may help you in determining that definition in the rules and regulations. And finally, I just want to echo that enforcement of any of these policies or guidelines will be a challenge. The law enforcement that is present on the beach on any given Sunday in a regular year is minimal. They vary on who they choose to enforce policy on, who they don't enforce policy on, and whether a tent obstructs my view on a beautiful day or not may annoy the hell out of me, but it has never put my health at risk. And so I think enforcement consistently and aggressively will need to be vital this season like no other, because other people's actions do put the health of our citizens at risk, not just their mental frustrations. So thank you, and I wish you all guidance in making these tough decisions.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Julia.
Julia, unmute, please.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Hello?
Yes, we.
Yeah,
Go
you're
ahead.
all doing a great job. I have to say one thing first. I'm a senior, and there are no free senior badges that I know of.
Just discount.
Yeah, just discounted. So the daily badges, the seniors still have to pay, as far as I know, right?
Yes.
Okay. That being said, a couple of things that haven't been talked about at all. And one is the attendant for the bathroom, the restrooms. They had a problem in the parks because they had to close the restrooms for obvious reasons, and we have to keep them open. And I really feel we have to talk about having attendance there and very strict guidelines on person going in, person going out, and the sanitation of all of this. And those attendants really should wear masks. That's because they're going to be dealing with an awful lot of people. So I don't know if you have any talked about that, the restrooms. I didn't hear any discussion on it.
Yeah, there's discussions going on with myself and the Department of Public Works supervisor, and we're going to outline those for our employees. That's more of a personnel matter, so those items are not on this document for discussion at this point.
Oh, okay. And the other thing was, I realized that I didn't know it because I was ill for a few years. I didn't realize that you didn't have to have a badge during the week, that you didn't have attendance every day like we used to have.
Julia, that's in the early time period historically prior to the schools closing. And so June 18th has been that Thursday before the second weekend in June has been the kickoff for the official beach season.
Okay, then we're going to have attendance at every
day.
entry? Okay, so those attendants, again, are they going to have masks? Are they going to also, well, I don't know. I don't know how is that going to be handled, because they're very much at risk because they're dealing with so many people, right? Same thing with the lifeguards or anybody that works on the beach.
Correct.
So are they going to be having?
I think the borough administrator said they're still working on that. We would never put any of our employees in a hazardous situation.
Yeah, right.
I don't, with regards to lifeguards, that might be a different
That's
situation.
going to be a problem, right? What am I?
At the beach access motion road.
Oh, yeah, another thing I had brought up when I emailed people about the access from Ocean Grove and Avon. People walking through, either way they can go from beach to beach to beach. Are we going to do anything about making sure that no one can do that?
Well, I mean, my wife and I take a walk from Bradley Beach to the inlet in Avon and back. If somebody's just walking along the shore, I don't think that's a major issue. I don't think anyone's going to. Yeah, because the shoreline is open to anyone.
No, I know, I do too. I just wondered how we were going to, if a lot of people started crowding. Well, we're going to be selling daily badges too after June 18th. That's what you said, right?
We will manage the beach starting at that time. In other words,
we don't
fully.
know if selling dailies or not.
No, that is the traditional kickoff date for full operation of the beach, which includes badge checkers and lifeguards.
Okay. Okay. By the way, I don't quite understand about masks, wearing masks. I mean, I have some pneumonitis, I have some lung condition, and I don't have a problem wearing a mask. I wear it when I need to. When I go out, I wear a mask. So I don't understand why somebody couldn't wear a mask. Somebody said something about people not being able to, and I don't know what that is.
Certain medical conditions, Julia, would prevent people from being able to wear masks, but it's probably very few people. And I'm in strong favor of strongly advising people to wear masks on the beach and boardwalk.
Yeah, I really feel very strongly about that. I think we've had little crowds already, you know. I drive back and forth and I saw that Bradley has more crowds than anywhere else because we allowed parking and the other towns didn't, right? So now I see Belmar has allowed parking and more people, so there are more people there. So what, if that's now, what's going to happen later? I'm really concerned that we're going to have a lot of crowds. And then I also had said that when I go down on the beach, I go later in the day. And I noticed at 5 o'clock or whenever the cutoff time is, it isn't dusk. People come on the beach for free. I mean, a lot of people that can't afford, you know, I understand why. And I didn't care. Now I care that there'll be crowds of people coming on the beach at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock or whatever. So how do we handle that?
So Julia, I think you've heard the point made tonight that this is an entirely different world we're entering. So, I think it's very safe to say that you're going to see constant postmortems days after to see what worked, what didn't, this is going to be a learning process for all of us. So if something's not working on day one, we can guarantee you that will not be the way we're doing it on day two.
No, I mean, I sympathize and I know it's a terrible problem, a very difficult problem. But I would like to go to the beach. So I am concerned because I'm at risk. And so if people aren't distancing, which I don't always see when I go down, and they don't wear masks, most people don't. Even around the area here, Jackie wears one when she walks the dog, or I wear one when I go out even for a drive in the car. But most people are not wearing them. So I think maybe the signage needs to be very strong about wearing them then. If we can't mandate it, maybe it can say something like highly recommended or who?
I think we're all in agreement on that.
Alan,
Okay, all right. Anything else I have on my list?
sitting on the boardwalk of the beach, and I think that's been answered.
Yeah, so you can sit on the beach, but you can't sit on the boardwalk, correct?
Correct. We don't want to, some of the towns have picked up and moved their benches. We'd rather not do that because for the most part, they were paid for by individuals and we don't want to break them. So we're just going to keep blocking with the tape for people can't sit there.
Yeah, I saw that. I thought that's fine. The only thing is you may run into people bringing their chairs and sitting on the boardwalk. You know, that people might do that. So that has to be something to be thought about as well, correct? Okay, that's really it. And I think this is a challenge and we all have to do it day by day by day, right?
Absolutely.
I wish you all success with this.
Thank you. David.
Thank you. Up next is Mr. TJ Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mayor, this is very difficult for you guys because you are the trustees for the beach. And but I do want to remind you, I'm a little puzzled about Governor Murphy's decisions so far. But on May 3rd, in 2019, Governor Murphy passed S-1074, which is public right of access for the beach. And you as trustees really need to understand that, you know, selling seasonal badges only is a problem. I mean, as you've said tonight, a seasonal badge is a guaranteed reservation. Well, not selling a daily badge is a guaranteed discrimination because the public of New Jersey still needs to come here, even if it's 500 people. So I'm hoping that daily badges will be available for Memorial Day weekend. And some other councilmen have already mentioned it. And I think it's it's definitely a public access problem, and it is discrimination. That being said, I do like your idea about manning the beaches on June earlier if we can, before June 18th. My question is, staffing wise, can Mr. Johnson do that?
Yeah,
I would say yes, it does back into the budget. So we'd have to look at the budget constraints that would apply on us. And I was talking to Dick via email, and it's a matter of just him doing scheduling of the matter.
Mhm. And as Mr. Deschampion said before, without the daily badges, we're just going to have defiant trespass because people are just going to go on the beach. The police don't really need any more than they already have on their plate. My other question is about the seasonal rentals. If we're not going to wait till June 5th, then we're going to go, I think you said May 26th. Why not go May 15th? I mean, if we're not following the guideline, do we follow the guideline on some things and not other things?
That's something that the chief and I have to revisit. I do appreciate the comments that you just provided as well as others, and we'll take all that in consideration with my discussion with the chief tomorrow morning.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that, Mr. Brown. And Mayor, thanks again for the workshops. I love the public interaction and the give and take. It really works well. Thank you.
Okay. Up next, we have Nancy. Nancy Meadow.
Nancy, you need to unmute if you're still there.
Well, I got Eileen raising her hand.
Yeah, I got that too. I guess Nancy's not there. We'll move on to Eileen.
Okay, 1 minute. Oh, am I on?
Yes, Eileen.
Okay. I was recently walking the boardwalk and I noticed signs in different boroughs where they were talking about showers. And I thought it was very interesting because I've noticed this in our town where people have shampooed their hair and soaped themselves at the showers. And these other municipalities have said no shampooing and no soaping at the showers. I thought that was interesting, and I thought it was something that we should seriously consider implementing here in our town.
Duly noted. Thank you. Next up, we have Julie.
Hi there. I am concerned too with the lifting of the short-term rental ban because we just don't have a grasp on people who are coming in and out with the rental properties as it is, especially being on the north end. We get hit with such crowds here. And, there's just, especially with Airbnb too, people just have been seen like just coming and going. And with the, with these properties, and if people are coming short term, you get into the whole health and safety aspect. Are the rental properties sanitized? Are they getting COs? We need to have a handle on that. And where people are coming from. People can be coming from hotspots, and we could face a spike. So I'm just concerned about what are we going to do about that aspect. Unfortunately on the beach, I just don't think that there's anything we really can do to truly enforce what's going to go on at the beach, because it can become a contentious situation at times. And I'm curious as to how many beach badges, seasonal badges, have we sold so far? And how does that correlate to dollars and numbers? And then that could be, to Mr. Cohen's point, is to say, all right, maybe we'll shut down seasonal badges for now or whatever, and then just have, how many can we sell on a daily basis so we don't have any litigation on our hands. So I just think, we're going to be in trial and error, but we've got to have some kind of plan. And Gary, I agree with what you said. It's like day one can be one policy, day two can be another, but I think we really, really got to have strategies in place. And short-term rentals, they are scaring me, especially since I'm in an area where it is very densely populated. I appreciate any kind of response on that.
Can I just chime in? What we've been discussing last hour is a plan. We have a written plan that's a draft. We're discussing it point by point. We all gave our input and the public's giving their input. So that's a plan.
What are we going to do about, you know, to Mr. Cohen's point, are we going to have short-term rentals? You know, when are we going to do this? Thought we had another 30 days, as Governor Murphy was saying. You know, and how are we going to monitor these short-term, and never mind the beach, but how are we going to monitor the short-term rentals?
The answer to that is that
most people don't get those, and we know that's a big problem in town.
the answer to the short-term rentals is you got to give the chief and I an opportunity to discuss this again tomorrow morning with different factors and different ideas that came out of this discussion tonight, and let's see where we can land. One of the things I personally will speak to is that if we do allow it, we can manage it better and control it better and know who's coming in and make sure proper COs are in place. One of the things that I'm afraid of right now is that people are doing what I refer to as willy-nilly, and I would like to rather manage it, but that's my personal opinion.
And the other part of this answer is that the borough, we have engaged a third party that's going to look into these short-term rentals, Airbnbs, and things like that, and make sure that they're getting COs. And you know, we did some back of the napkin calculations, and it looks like we're going to capture, you know, maybe only 20% of the people are getting COs when they need to, and when we bring that number way up, that's going to mean more compliance with our rules, and of course, more resources for the borough. So. Those are good things. I agree with you, Julie. It's not been that well policed, so to use the word, in the past, but we've already engaged a firm to do this going forward.
Okay, that sounds great. I just want to know is that we're really going to stay on top of that, because for me, the short-term rentals concerns me more than, you know, being on the beach and, you know, fresh air. You know what I mean? That's just my opinion. But thank you. I appreciate that.
Understood. Thank you. Next up, Nancy Meadow is back.
I think so. Can you hear me?
All right. Yes, we can hear you this time.
Okay, I found the mute button. I just wanted to put this out there. I would think that the staffing for the beaches early in June would not be a problem since school is closed. That is where most of the personnel, lifeguards, come from. If you're going to limit the number of beach badges sold, how are you going to limit the number of people on one beach? What would, you know, not everybody's going to go and disperse evenly. So you might have overcrowding, which I think you need to have a plan on, because some beaches get more than others. How are you going to limit the people that sit on the lawns in their lawn chairs and blankets, which quite honestly has always offended me? I think you also will need to do tremendous PR, especially for travel and foreign language speaking people who come to visit us. And the last 2 points, which I'll just say are opinion, even though I personally believe them to be fact. As an educator, there is a difference between a beach and a park. I do not appreciate classifying our beaches as a park. And in my opinion, the governor left the choices of beaches and boardwalks to the municipalities. He has deliberately not set guidelines because he's given us the flexibility and assumes that we have the wisdom to know what is best for our community. That's it.
Thank you. All points well taken. Next, we have Mary Ann Spillman.
I'm sorry, I had left off one question that I had. I hope I'm not taking more of my time than I'm allotted, but I just had a question about social distancing. I agree with, we really need to focus on social distancing, but how will we, if people are on a beach, we're not talking, are we, about one person and then 6 feet away, one person? We're talking about families, groups that are already a family group. They're already sheltering together. They would be not expected to be 6 feet away, from your spouse or your sibling or your children. They're going to be groups of people. And how will we know when people are supposed to be grouped together like that, and when they are like a party that's taking place? I think we're not talking about individual spacing.
I think we just have to rely on the excellent training of the police department and the specials. And as they're out there to enforce, they'll have to make these decisions on the spot. It's something new to all of us. It'll be new to them. And we just have to put our trust into the police department.
Thank you.
Next up is Frank Luna. Frank, you there?
Hey guys, you got me?
Okay, now we can hear you.
Alrighty, this is Frank Luna. I live down on Ocean Avenue in Bradley Beach. But real quick, I want to check in on behalf of Jersey Central Power and Light. I'm the area manager for the community. I was gone for 6 months for some training with the Army National Guard. And it's nice to be able to check in with you guys and say hey and just listen to what's going on in town. I don't envy anybody right now, as everyone else has said. But more than anything, just wanted to give a quick hey from JCP&L. We're here, we're active. Our teams and crews are out working, God bless them, like crazy to make sure the lights are staying on. And more importantly, I just hope everybody's doing their best to stay positive and happy. I know it's definitely tough. So hang in there, everybody, and good luck with everything you guys are doing. It's awesome stuff that you're trying to capitalize on and get done for the town. So thank you, guys.
Thanks for popping in, Frank, and thanks for your service as well.
All right, right on. You bet.
Up next, Nancy Meadow.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just thought 2 more points, which is I want to make sure that I'm hearing correctly that I may sit and read a book on the beach as I was made to leave on May 2nd. So has that policy been rescinded? And then the second point is, I don't know that our police department is capable of recognizing who is a family and who is not in order to social distance, as I had neighbors who lived together and are partners, and they were told they had to separate in their own driveway. So this all also needs to be taken into consideration, but I would like to know whether or not I may sit and read a book on the beach.
Yes, you may.
The first question is yes, you may. And the second one, I think in the context that you put that, that may have been seen as a gathering. I don't know if there was 10 or more people there.
2 people? Sitting?
No, that would not be considered a gathering.
I agree.
Okay, thank you for your comment then. I do not see any more hands, Mayor, so I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, David, you and the chief will compile the notes and come back with a revised version. It's my expectation that you'll take our input, but you and the chief in your capacity will make the final determination.
Yes, we'll get another draft out to the governing body before it's finalized.
All right, moving on with the agenda. The consent agenda includes the following items. Item A is the bill list, and item B is a tax title lien redemption in the amount of $2,492.50 for 707 Ocean Avenue. Would anyone like any of these voted out separately? Hearing none, I'll make a motion, to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Vanel? Randy?
He's giving a thumbs up.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay. Mr. Gubitosi?
Yes.
Mr. Sexsmith?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Mayor Engelstad?
Yes. Our first resolution is number 2020-113. Is the approval of Patricia McGill, CMCA, at an annual salary increase of $15,000 for the additional responsibilities of the Allen Hurst Courts, which is part of our Bradley Beach municipal court situation here. Is there any comments or question with regards to this resolution? Hearing none, I'll make a motion to approve the resolution. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Benel?
Yes.
Mr. Gubitosi?
Yes.
Mr. Sexsmith?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Mayor Engelstad?
Yes. Resolution 2020-114 is the approval of Amy Hall of a stipend of $15,000 for the additional responsibilities of COVID-19 related communications from the period of May 15th through August 15th, 2020. Any questions or comments from council with regards to this resolution?
Mr. Mayor, the only comments I want to make for the benefit of the public, a lot of individuals reached out to me and perhaps other council members at one point or another. Largely, the discussion was just questioning the role, and I think our BA has explained it fairly thoroughly to the council, and I think to a number of our residents, that the primary focus of this role would be to assist you directly and the BA in communication specifically related to COVID-19, and you anticipate that entails not only the actual act of communicating, but of course drafting the communications, attending meetings. There's a lot of work, as our borough BA explained to me, to supporting this dollar amount.
That's well said. And based upon the comments we've had tonight, assuming this approval, she is going to have her hands full. A lot of communications required with regards to COVID-19 and beach and the recommendations of masks. There's a lot going on in there. So I think this is the right thing to do. I'll make a motion to approve the resolution 2020-114. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Benel? Randy?
Yes.
Mr. Gubitosi?
Yes.
Mr. Sexsmith?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Mayor Engelstad?
Yes. Resolution 2020-115 is the approving and authorizing a consent letter with Verizon Wireless for certain modifications to equipment mounted upon the monopole tower located on a portion of the borough's properties at 721, 723 Main Street. This is not additional rental of the site. It's just some equipment modifications. So it's fairly straightforward. Any questions or comments with regards to this?
Mr. Mayor, I did have a question. I saw the schematics, and I just wanted to make sure. I know our resolution says our engineer, Mr. Frieda, reviewed this, and I didn't see a report or anything that he might have assembled. But if he's still with us, I think he was on earlier tonight. Oh, there I see Jerry. I was wondering, Jerry, could you just comment as to whether or not this is the modifications are at all obtrusive in any way? An eyesore in any way to the public, anything that we would be concerned about?
No, after our review, we were satisfied that that would not be the case.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Hearing no other comments, I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2020-115. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Benel?
Yes.
Mr. Gubitosi?
Yes.
Mr. Sexsmith?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Mayor Engelstad?
Yes. Resolution 2020-116 authorizes the Department of Public Works to hire summer seasonal employees. Any questions or comments with regards to this resolution? Hearing none, I'll make a motion to approve the resolution. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Bennell,
Yes.
Mr. Gubatose,
Yes.
Mr. Sexsmith,
Yes.
Mr. Weber,
Yes.
Mayor Engelstad.
Yes, resolution 2020-117 is of the authorizing support of the innovative ecological conceptual approach for Sylvan Lake restoration. And I'm going to ask both Mr. Frida and the Sylvan Lake liaison, Councilmember Gubatose, to provide us some background information on this one, please.
Okay, Jerry, I'll start and then I'll turn it over to you. But there has been a fairly lengthy effort spanning at least 2 or 3 months now that a group of environmentalists, one of the leads of which is Jim Shishius, a resident of Bradley Beach, have been looking at ways to restore Sylvan Lake. And it's a fairly complex approach, but it's much more cost effective than anything we've been able to consider in the past. There are contaminants in the lake tied to arsenic in particular, things that would make it very prohibitive cost-wise to dredge the lake. So without getting into a lot of detail about the specifics of the plan, this is very environmentally structured to be minimally invasive to wildlife, to create a system, I'll call it as a layperson, a system of filtering that would actually better manage the siltation that comes into the lake and the contaminants. The challenge was this group of environmentalists want to bring the plan to the New Jersey DEP to get either their approval or their feedback. And before they could do that, they need not only the borough of Bradley Beach, but also the borough of Avon to provide a letter of support to say, basically, without turning over the keys to the house here, just simply saying, we agree with the philosophy of what you're approaching, and please consider moving forward. We still reserve the right to approve things as this evolves. And we asked our engineer, Mr. Frida, to sit in on a presentation from the environmentalist so he could get an understanding of the general nature of this approach. So, Jerry, I know at a high level you felt that it was a sound approach, but would you be able to speak to it a little bit more than I just did?
I can add a little bit. Their whole approach and the concept is pretty much to work within the boundaries of the lake itself. Maybe converting the western edge of the lake to more of a wetland area, and then dredge the rest of the lake as much as they can using geotubes and those type of things to kind of build a bank within the lake up to the wall or a retaining wall. Now, none of this has really been presented in an engineering or design fashion. It's only schematic. But I do think there's some merits to what they're trying to do, because the big cost in dredging is not really the activity of dredging. It's getting rid of the material. And in this case, they would try to keep it on site using the geotubes. So DEP still has to weigh in on all this. So they have a long way to go. But I do think that they're on a track that could possibly work and definitely enhance the condition of the lake. So I think the borough should support their efforts to this point.
And I want to add, they're also evaluating and exploring various resources for funding, so that should this plan ultimately materialize and be approved by the borough, the anticipation is that there would be significant funding available from outside sources.
Thank you. So I will make a motion to approve resolution 2020-117. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Bennell,
Yes.
Mr. Gubatose,
Yes.
Mr. Sexsmith,
Yes.
Mr. Weber,
Yes.
Mayor Engelstad.
Yes, Resolution 2020-118 authorizes a correction from a previous resolution, 2020-108, appointing Erica Costas, RMC, as municipal clerk effective April 28, 2020. Mr. Brown, would you like to explain why we have to do this correction?
I'm going to defer to the borough attorney, Greg.
Sure. So as you know, last time we had a resolution appointing Erica as the acting clerk because the prior clerk is currently receiving retirement benefits from the borough. The statute for the clerk only allows two ways to appoint the clerk. Someone with an RMC has to be appointed as the municipal clerk for a 3-year term, or you can appoint someone without a registered municipal clerk certificate to a 1-year term up to 3 times with the approval of the DCA. And so I believe that the administration was attempting to appoint Erica as the acting clerk last time to reflect that the prior clerk is still receiving retirement benefits. However, under the clerk statute, Erica, because she has an RMC, must be appointed as the municipal clerk. And how financially or administratively the other employees' retirement benefits are paid out are a separate matter than the appointment of the current employee. So whether you call the prior employee a clerk or on retirement leave or a terminal leave, or terminal leave is the appropriate term under the borough code, the statuses are two different things, one for state purposes and one for our financial and borough purposes. It's a little, there's a little more nuance to the prior employee's situation with retirement benefits, but that's not really an appropriate discussion for this public session because it's a prior employees who did not receive a rights notices business. But suffice to say, Erica either has to be the clerk or not the clerk at all, because there's only two ways under the statute to appoint a clerk. And all of that surrounds ultimately the appointed clerk's tenure entitlements, which regardless of what the resolution says 2 weeks ago would be April 29th, 2023 for tenure purposes, regardless under the case law and everything prevailing. So Dave and I had a discussion about this, about how to classify the prior employee in order to ensure that Erica's appointment is appropriate and correct under the clerk statute. And so this corrects that resolution, but doesn't involve any change of money or anything else from the last time. It's simply making sure that the acting designation was removed because Erica has an RMC. Congratulations, Erica. And that means she's 3 years.
Okay, thank you very much. Make a motion to approve resolution 2020-118. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Mr. Bunnell?
Yes.
Mr. Gubatose?
I would much rather have Erica as the clerk as opposed to not the clerk at all. So yes.
Mr. Sexsmith?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Mayor Engelstad?
Yes, once again, Erica, congratulations.
And once again, thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well deserved. Now it's time for mayor and council reports. Council President Weber.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So as a bonus for these people that have hung in here for this very long meeting, I'm just going to address a couple things that were talked about a long time ago. With respect to passive recreation, I just noticed on the state's list, those are all things where people keep moving. So it was brought up with respect to the wording. Maybe we do, to make it clear, we're letting people sit on the beach. Maybe sedentary recreation is the word we want to use. That's fine. With respect to Ivy that Ms. Nutitis brought up, I know what you're talking about and that tree on the rec field. I think we just have to figure out if that tree is on borough property or if it's on the neighboring private property. That's the issue to me. For Mr. Cohen, the first item you brought up about painting the 2nd Avenue concession building. I know the painter that got the contract and I simply asked him and he said, it's the DEP's call. And basically it's all about the price. If the contractor gives them a price and it's a good price, they're like, all right, that's better than we were going to do. And the contractor gets it. And if the price is too high, the DPW says, no, thanks, we can do this ourselves. So I'm sure the DPW would, I trust them to make those decisions. So that's glad that they do that. Okay, few other things. going, I know we just had a lengthy discussion about what we're doing Memorial Day and going forward. I just want to say for the record that, we have this time period basically now or starting like a week or so ago when the weather started getting really nice up until Memorial Day. And I was in favor of closing the east side of Ocean Ave to parking, opening it up, more space. And I wanted a policy of people to keep it moving on the beach, as in, you can walk, you can recreate, do what the governor says when you can go outside, not sitting on our beach. I think we dodged a bullet because last weekend was kind of chilly for at least Saturday. That's what I had wanted. That's not what happened. It's, you win some, you lose some. It's not, I think we're moving in a great direction and that's fine. But just for the record, some of us favored some different policies than what we actually had. With respect to the Bradley Beach Environmental Commission, we applied for a fellow through the Environmental Defense Fund. They were providing a fellow who's like a master's student to come and work with the borough as an intern for the summer on energy related items. And it looks like that has happened and we're going to get this person. Of course, we've committed to working with them remotely, but they're going to work on energy related issues, like probably helping with energy audits at borough buildings. So that's a real positive step in terms of maybe some energy savings for the borough, which is great. On community development, I think I mentioned before, we want to look at a plan that allows restaurants to use additional space. If it's a parking area, if they have a back patio, maybe they could put a tent up and use that space. I'm anticipating that the governor's going to come up with he's going to say restaurants can open, but maybe at 50% capacity. We want to do what we can in town to make sure restaurants can increase their footprint, their surface area, so they can get more tables in there. And I've talked to George Waterman. He says this is a good plan. I'm trusting that the borough attorney will get us a proper resolution for our next meeting so we can make that happen. And I'm also in favor of waiving the fee for sidewalk cafes, again, so our businesses can just increase their distance between diners at the restaurants. Then the only other thing is with respect to the beach, I did forward something recently to the Councilman Sexsmith, who helps with the beach with myself and the borough administrator, as well as the DPW supervisor, just reminding people that we agreed to a beach management plan with the DEP. It had to do with shorebirds and nesting birds. And, it's basically a plan where, well, if these birds show up, there's certain things we can't do, certain mechanical things, driving and beach raking and scraping in certain areas. And if the birds don't end up nesting and staying, then, we can kind of forget that. But I just sent that as a reminder. I think we got to remember we're sharing the beach with some other folks as well. So that is all I have. I appreciate it, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Sexsmith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, a couple of reminders. Tomorrow is the second Wednesday of the month, so it'll be Plastic Film Recycling Day. I know I have an absolutely enormous bag of plastic film that I'm going to put out there for DPW. Also, DPW is planning on having a bulk trash pickup day on Thursday. This is in support of everybody who's basically been spending their isolation time cleaning out their basements and their attics and their garages. So if you've got any bulk items you need to get carted away, please get it out there by tomorrow afternoon. They'll be working on Thursday and Friday to pick it up. The only equipment or the only items that they are not going to take are building materials, so cinder blocks, lumber, drywall, those sorts of things. When we move on to quality of life, as just a reminder that goes along with the bulk pickup and all that work we've been doing, cleaning out our basements and our garages. As the weather's getting nicer, it's time to use that nice outside weather and also start picking up our yards, cleaning the gardens, cutting the grass. You walk around town, you hear pressure washers running everywhere. We just need to keep up pushing on that. I would like to thank everybody who's online. Last I looked, there was about 65 participants. We're down to 48 now. It's 20 minutes to 10. I appreciate, and I think I'm speaking for all the members of the council and the mayor and the BA, we appreciate all these public comments on the proposed ordinances, and also as we're trying to navigate our way through getting the beach open and safely be able to participate on the beach. People have said it before, but I think the best analogy I've heard is that we are trying to build the plane while we're busy flying it. So thank you for the votes of confidence, and thank you for your comments, and we will continue to try and let this plan evolve so that we can all safely use the beach going forward. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Bonnell?
Don't forget me too, Mr. Mayor.
I got you on my list.
I'm going to supersede you, Al.
You are. That's okay.
I really want to thank everybody who showed up. I wish we had 78 participants at every meeting. Even though we probably don't have enough room in the meeting room, it would be great. The only thing I really have to add right now is that I had a conversation with Biagio this week, and they did a little experiment with collecting cardboard. And I was a little surprised when he told me that they collected over 2 tons last week in one day. And that's about 75% of what they usually collect on Main Street because of all the businesses that are closed. And he wants to put forward a plan for a dedicated cardboard pickup day. He's still kind of working through the details. He's going to get back to me. But I think it's probably going to be a very good idea. Go ahead, Al.
Okay, thanks, Randy. Yeah, so first of all, I want to echo what Mr. Sexsmith and Mr. Bonnell said. I also was struck. I think at one point we had over 70 attendees, and it's great to have all this feedback. I wonder, it's certainly one positive thing that's come out of this otherwise challenging time with the pandemic, but I wonder if it might even open doors for us in the future once we do have a return to normalcy, if there might be an opportunity to create more of an interactive experience for our residents who can't attend meetings live. I know it's probably asking a lot, but let's keep that idea open. Also, Randy, I love what Biagio shared with you. He mentioned a little of it to me. It sounds like it could be a significant moneymaker for the borough. Orders of magnitude, $30,000, $40,000 a year of a swing in terms of either spending less or being able to sell the cardboard for more. So yeah, applaud what DPW is suggesting. We talked about Sylvan Lake and we talked about the restoration project. I'm the liaison there. What we didn't talk about was, but a number of people noticed, the borough engineer was working on a project that required us to have to drain the lake, Sylvan Lake, this past week. The problem was they had to fix some sort of a release valve. I don't know the details of it, but this is something that was actually scheduled back in 2019. It had to target a particular time frame that was approved by the NJDEP as well as Fish and Wildlife to be minimally disruptive to our wildlife. So a few people had some anxiety over the fact that the lake level dropped. My understanding is that the valve was finally fixed, and it should take, I'm told, about 10 days for the lake to refill. So for anyone else who's experiencing anxiety over that, hopefully it's just a few more days and we'll have the lake back to form. And I think this drain was in disrepair for close to 20 years. So hopefully it's now under control. I am a member of the planning board, and just as a quick update, our chairman, Mr. Bill Shuck, is in the process of collecting feedback from the meeting we had a couple of weeks ago from the borough, and that will be shared with the mayor and council on the beach concession / salt restaurant. I'm a member of the community center committee, and the thing I want to mention there, Mr. Paul Nishamkin's doing a wonderful job getting that organized. One thing that I want to mention actually to the mayor and the rest of the council is that I think we should spend some time in the meetings going forward addressing how we lock down that building, how we kind of protect our investment, because a lot of the engineer reporting did come back suggesting there's a lot of water infiltration challenges. And I imagine that's something we'll want to get corrected before we head into the fall and winter. Finally, as part of the Main Street Task Force, Liz Hernandez is leading that up. And as everyone probably remembers, from a month or so ago, we announced that we've been awarded a grant. There's starting to be some activity around this grant that will help us kind of revision Main Street. I won't do it justice right now, but just to say that the task force will be working with this group that has, from Rutgers and others, that have awarded us some engineering support to re-envision what our streetscape should look like on Main Street. And that's it for me.
Okay, I've got just a couple of things. This is a repeat of an announcement from last meeting that I've been asked to give again, which is the new Bradley Beach Business Community Alliance has announced they will waive membership dues for all small businesses in town for the remainder of 2020 and credit current businesses and nonprofit members in 2021. They hope all 100 Bradley Beach businesses will join. The Alliance will launch an individual resident membership drive, and dues will be dedicated to supporting our small businesses and the creation of new programs for Bradley Beach residents. Please join the Alliance. The website is www.bradleybeachalliance.org. And we have I'm participating in a meeting tomorrow with members of the Alliance as they plan a special kickoff event when our businesses will be coming back to life. One item to add to Councilmember Sexsmith's comments about the bulk trash pickup. Those of you who are participating, consider, you're not buying stickers this time as you normally would. Consider an online donation to the food pantry. I got a nice note from Linda Curtis that a number of people have already done that, so we thank you for remembering this critical part of our borough. Memorial Day. A few weeks ago, we had to make the tough decision to cancel the Memorial Day parade. But the more we thought about it, we wanted to still honor the gentleman that we had selected to be our Grand Marshal, and his name is Roy Christensen. If you don't know Roy, he's a lifelong member of the fire department, serving since 1974, which, do the math, is 46 years. He's still one of the top drivers and a trustee to the fire department. He does a great job in putting together fundraisers to support the volunteers of the fire company. His fish fry and the unity picnic between the fire and first aid are big hits. The big New Year's Day event, he puts all that together. Roy, along with his wife, Kathy, who, by the way, is a lifelong member of the fire company's Ladies Auxiliary, have raised 3 firefighting sons, Scott, Mark, and John. He has served as chief of the fire department as well as a long career as the borough superintendent. So here's what we're going to do. And this is something that Councilmember Sexsmith and I cooked up, and with the chief's approval and with the support of the fire department. We're going to bring the parade to Bradley Beach. We're going to take a fire truck and a convertible, and we're going to parade Roy around town on the morning of the Saturday morning of Memorial Day weekend. And we're going to encourage everyone to come out to your front steps or your front porch and cheer for Roy and thank him for his 46 years of service to the borough. And almost like when we did the food pickup with the fire trucks, the trucks will go up and down the streets, the east-west streets. And it'll be a short parade, but it'll be a meaningful one. And Roy is thrilled to be honored. And we, again, I want to thank the chief for helping us do this. And we think it'll be a great event. My second last event notice is, this time of year, there's a lot of things that are being canceled, weddings, parties. Around this time of year, the Bradley Beach students would have been having their 8th grade trip. And that, many of you know that the trip is to Washington, D.C., and it's a town that's special to me, and it just breaks my heart that they're not being able to do that this year. So, those of you who have been in New Jersey a long time, Bruce Springsteen, and one of his favorite songs, one of my favorite songs is Rosalita. And there's a line from the Rosalita where he says, someday we'll look back on this and it'll all seem funny. And I'm praying that these 8th grade kids someday will look back, and remember how tough it was. They didn't get their 8th grade trip. They didn't get their formal graduation ceremony. But maybe they can look back at this as a part of their lives where they got closer to their family and friends. But I just want you all to think about these kids because it's something they look forward to for 7 or 8 years. Then it doesn't happen. It's really tough. The final thing, I just want to sing the praises of our borough administrator, David Brown. I jokingly made the remark a couple of weeks ago that he was drinking from a fire hydrant. He is really making a huge difference in town, and it's not easy because he's right there, over there in a closed door, wearing a mask, and he's on the phone constantly. He's off to a really nice start, and I just want to publicly acknowledge the work that he has done. At this time, we'll take any public comment, and once again, I'll ask David to moderate that. After I sang his praises, he better moderate it really well.
Thank you, Mayor, for that acknowledgement. We have Paul the champion.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank the council and the mayor for this really deep discussion tonight, a long meeting, but a lot of very important things. I'm thrilled that we're going to try to open the beach, and I hope that we come up with a plan that really is successful. On a lighter note, I'd like to let you all know, if you haven't already noticed, the Bradley Beach Historical Society is going to have an event on Sunday, May 17th at 3 p.m., virtual event on Zoom. Already over 80 people have registered for it. There's still room. Basically, we're going to start a series of Bradley Beach stories, and this one will be about Virgil's, which was the local hangout on Newark Avenue for many, many years. And a lot of people have fond memories of that. Betty Bloom will tell a story, and Marianne Galicetti will be there to talk and answer questions about her family's place, Virgil's. I have a lot of other things to comment on, but it's late, and I think we should all get home. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I see no electronic hands.
Jim Shushius.
Oh, there's a physical hand. Please unmute yourself.
Jim, go ahead.
Unmute. I think I'm unmuted.
Yeah, you're good.
Things quickly. John Weber, you mentioned an intern. I see Frank Luna from JCP&L is still there. So I would recommend you connect the intern with Jersey Central because they have a lot of programs from an energy audit standpoint. So you might want to make that connection with John and Frank. The other is with respect to Sylvan Lake. Hopefully the pandemic is not going to scramble our eggs, but I think we're on the verge of accomplishing something that would be very, very significant, not only for Bradley Beach, but if this works, it would be a model for the entire Atlantic coast, which has many, many coastal lakes just like ours that are lakes that are in very bad condition for the same reasons. And so far, we've been given encouragement from DEP that since Sandy, they've recognized that they have to take a different approach to how they deal with restoration because the old way is too expensive, it's not going to work. So they have some preliminary indication of this creative, innovative approach that Avon and Bradley Beach have structured, which Jerry and Al referenced. And just as a follow-up, having taken action tonight on our resolution, Al, if you can somehow communicate with Avon that we need a companion resolution from them, then with the two boroughs sending something to DEP, will open the door for us to have a meeting with the assistant commissioner there and her staff so we can keep this moving. Working in parallel, we've already reached out to various funding sources. So keep in mind, something that has eluded us for all of these years has resulted in a deterioration of Sylvan Lake. Now, looks like it has possibilities with no cost to either town, if you can imagine that. So that's a big deal of doing a restoration using this creative approach that will not involve any funding from Avon and Bradley Beach. It is, to me, a very, very significant advancement. So hopefully it'll all work. Thank you.
Jim, thank you for all your work with regards to Sylvan Lake. We appreciate it.
We have a Don on an iPhone with his hand raised.
Hey, guys, just one last thing. When John mentioned the intern, my primary residence in Princeton, we recently contracted with what they call an aggregator, and we were able to get green energy offsets for the entire town at a very minimal increase in the price per kilowatt hour. And maybe, John, that's something you want to look into. I could get the information from Sustainable Princeton if you're interested in looking into that. It was maybe half a cent more per kilowatt hour to get about 50% of your energy from a green source, and maybe about a penny more to get 100% from a green source. So I thought that's something that Bradley might be interested in doing. The way it works for the provider is that it's an opt-out. So if the town decides to do it, everybody's automatically opted in unless they decide to opt out. So I don't know if that's something Bradley wants to do, but it's kind of a great way to get green energy for everybody at almost the same price they're paying JCP&L.
Will do. Thanks, Don. That's great.
I'll send you that information, John.
Thank you. We have Rich with his hand up. Rich?
Yep.
Go ahead, Rich.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Hey, hi, everybody. First off, wow, thank you so much. Everybody's been doing a lot of thinking about some very, very difficult decisions, and I can't see it coming together any better than what you guys have done. Thank you so much. Commercial time, June 1st, the library is going to be sponsoring a photography contest. And the details are on the website. And in preparation for this, tomorrow at 2 o'clock, Zoom meeting, details at the library. It'll be a presentation for photography hints and tips and so on at beginners. When you come to that meeting, you're going to find this photograph you see hanging on my wall. You're going to see how that picture came together. It ain't easy to do. So chime in, join us. Look forward to it. Once again, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Rich.
Mayor, there are no more electronic hands raised.
Okay, just one last plug, and that is please remember all our restaurants in town that are offering takeout. A week ago tonight, you couldn't get anything out of Pancho and Wancho's and Finn's because it was Cinco de Mayo, but let's pretend that every night is Cinco de Mayo in terms of reaching out to our restaurants. I want them all to still be here in 3 months. They got to be struggling. So, make that part of your weekly dinner plans to support our restaurants that are offering takeout. Make a motion to close the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Hi.
Good night, gentlemen.
Hi, everybody. Nice seeing you.
Good night.
Night, everybody.
See ya. Laters.